Backing up.
Okay, welcome everyone. I'm going to call the meeting to order at 6:32 PM. First order of business is the discussion of the start time for future meetings. There had been some discussion of starting it earlier since we're now doing these jointly again. So I wanted to get a feel for those of you who could make it at 6 versus keeping it at 6:30. Thoughts?
How about that? Says the girl walking in late.
6:30 seems to work
Okay.
pretty good for me.
Yep.
Yeah. Should be comfortable.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
We're going to meet all summer. That's true.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
6 works for me.
all right then. Next is the feedback and review of site visits. So last Tuesday. Yes, no, okay, last Tuesday, several of us went to the Woburn Public Library and the West Somerville Branch Library. And toured the inside and out and didn't know if anyone wanted to give any feedback from that.
Well, I'd like to hear, since I wasn't there, I'd like to hear
Absolutely.
people's impression.
Andrew, I think you were going to say something.
Yeah, I mean, I think they were both good examples of doing contemporary additions that complement historic buildings. And what was really interesting to me actually was how the buildings interfaced between each other and the transitions. And there was a discussion in our last meeting about the ramps versus the elevator. And the West Branch Library, for instance, did just the elevator. There's just no room for a ramp. It was such a small addition, but it was very direct connection, which I think could work. So then maybe think a little bit differently about giving space over versus, but I'm sure you've got lots of examples of both. And the kind of the connection in the Woburn one, I think was pretty interesting and successful.
I liked being able to like visually see like the different materials like up close, like, okay, this is what copper looks like up front, or this is what, you know, like what a cement versus the brick might look next to each other. Like I just liked seeing all the different materials like in person. I know you probably have more experience with that, but I didn't have any experience with those things. And I liked seeing the outdoor settings. I think the West Branch had some good like exterior features that we could take advantage of, I think, at Randall to kind of keep the traffic from like their seating areas and stuff like that. Like they,
Yeah. The West Branch had a better indoor-outdoor connection.
yes, for sure.
The forecourt as a solution to get into a building with 2 entrances was really successful and a nice
Yeah.
space. And then in the back was like a whole nother room that, I mean, on a day like today, you could really use it and kind of double up the
Right.
space. And that opening wall was really nice,
Yeah, I was surprised that Woburn had no outdoor space.
despite having a lot of outdoor space.
Yeah,
exactly. Not even a bench to be found.
Yeah, there was a
Yeah.
bench.
There was one
It was in the
bench.
middle of
That's
a lawn in the back. It was
Yeah,
Never been sat.
there was not near any doors, so
Yeah.
it's like hard to get.
I wonder if maybe they pack their stuff away, like maybe it's, they
I-
don't want it to.
No, it didn't even
It
look
just
like
wasn't
it.
designed for it, yeah. There
Like they
wasn't.
have a rolling front lawn, but there's
Yeah.
no walkways across it. It's just because it was, I mean, it's a massive, massive building.
And then there was like a little kind of dead bird space.
Yeah.
Between the
Yeah.
erosion and the
Yeah,
existing
I-
space that wasn't really
If I can
usable.
move at all.
Yeah.
How big is Woburn, do you know?
It's huge.
Yeah, absolutely massive.
No, I meant how many people.
The town?
Yeah.
I guess, well, they have 27 full-time employees in the library. They're city, so
But it was also good to see
41,000.
like kind of how the Woburn Library had like private, like not private, but like smaller reading rooms, like set up, like quiet spaces that had glass doors and stuff like that. And they've said that those have been like very popular and that they've had to like put in more cubicles and put in more like space. But then I think I was talking with Andrew, we were walking around and like, there was probably what, 50 adults in that library when we were there. And there was not a single person in any of the comfortable reading spaces
Yeah, they converted a lot of the comfortable spaces into workspaces.
back to workspaces, because I think people are just like, they always have their computers with them. So like, that's what they were surprised by, that they've, they still have some, like, they still have a lot of comfy nook kind of areas, but people would rather sit at a table than they would like a loungy kind of chair, because then they can't use their laptops, and they've had to put in more power sources.
Yeah, they couldn't put in as many study spaces as they wanted to because they didn't have the power.
Yeah.
Where the lounge space was, right, like this, so they didn't have that flexibility.
Is that a work from home phenomenon? I mean, were the people there more people working rather than like reading a
Maybe.
book or something?
Yes.
Yeah.
Probably. It
Yeah.
looked like a lot of people were using it as workspaces. And there were people, even at West Branch, that were kind of like taking meetings, it seemed like, in the spaces.
Both
Yeah.
libraries.
Both
were
libraries
very
had
busy.
meetings, like with, like,
We've been hearing that people have been spending more time in a single day at the library
Yeah.
than they used to, like taking meetings, or even
Right.
we've recently heard that people will spend hours there, nannies will bring kids there now.
Yeah.
Well, that
entirely,
was
so.
what an amazing observation was. West Somerville, as small as it is, there were so many people in that children's room.
it was.
And then when we went to Woburn, which their children's room's the size of Randall,
Yeah.
but there was not
There was
one
nobody.
person in there. It was
That's right.
strange.
Yeah.
But I think that
Different
also just
demographic.
different
Yeah.
demographic, and
Yeah.
also just like, it felt different.
Yeah,
Like
it
the-
wasn't as warm.
Yeah, the West Branch was more welcoming, and I don't know why that, it was like
Woburn
cozier.
was
or
a
something.
little, I wouldn't say it's sterile, but it was a little sterile. It was a little kind of, it
Just
was a
so
little-
big.
the material palette and finishes and organization were a little institutional, even on the outside.
I think they've had, so that was a $33 million project. 9.9 funded by the state through the state aid program. I think they've had some leadership changes, so there was
Oh,
a
yeah, they definitely
different
did.
leader during, I'm trying to be very politically
Yeah.
correct and dodge to my bias when I say this. There's a very different leader when the project was finished in 2019, and now it's a much more welcoming,
The
staff
director is amazing.
appreciated.
Yeah, the director came right out. We didn't have a meeting with her. She came out, she showed us everything. She was unlocking rooms and
Yeah,
letting
she
us
was
into
great.
staff spacing, and they formed a foundation. Someone formed a foundation to do a lot of fundraising there. They have rooms dedicated everywhere. They have, you walk in, which we kind of talked about that we didn't like, but you walk in, there's just a list of all the donors and the level they donated at. They did a lot. She said the foundation continues, and just gave them like another $10,000, and that's how they built all those little private, 2-person workspaces, because they just have so much money.
Well, the community is very proud.
Yeah.
Did
And
they
it-
renovate the historic building as well, or just put on an addition?
They
looked
renovated
like it was
it.
restored.
Yeah, it's been
Yeah,
restored.
restored,
They've,
yeah.
they've kind of
It's
blocked off some
It's quite
spaces.
exquisite.
Yeah.
I mean, but it's a
Beautiful
it's a
thing.
classic of
It
American
is
architecture.
Yeah.
It's iconic.
I will say though, so on the way back, we drove through the Concord Museum, and I think, I think we're more similar to the West Branch in size and demographics and sort of needs. But I really liked the Concord Museum color palettes and the way that the addition there tied into the original building. They sort of tied into the grout color, which is like almost like a pale yellow, and then the building, the addition is like a yellow. It just looked really nice. It was a little different than the glass addition that we had seen. So if you haven't seen it, I would encourage you guys to look at that too. Even just driving by, we just sort of walked around. We went in, but they weren't really having any part of us touring it, so we just walked around the outside ourselves and looked at it. But that's a really nice building too.
Yeah, I
Nice comparison.
I also went by there on my own. And the rock was what I liked, how they incorporated the rock to match kind of everything else that was, I really like that part of it, like exterior, like when I went, they also were like, yeah, you have to have an escort, it's not a thing, and I'm like, okay. But yeah, from what I could see, I really liked the rock and the way that they incorporated that too. I was gonna say the same.
It was really nice. You guys did a good job of that.
Thank you, right?
It's definitely worth, in my opinion, going to the Concord Library. It's nearby and was just completed in the past 18 months. So again, massive 55,000 square foot addition, but, or 55,000 square feet total, and total 100% privately funded. It's a little bit of a different makeup there, but it's definitely worth looking at that project because the glass was a big deal. I mean, it did not pass the HTC took about 14 months. Around the time you guys were doing the museum project, actually.
Mhm.
And it was a big, and the MHC wouldn't sign off on it, so we had to give back $250,000 of funding from the
Wow.
state through the Cultural Facilities Fund. So it was kind of a big deal, but now people are really excited about it.
Sorry, which project is this?
Concord,
So the one right in the center?
it is right. in the
Yeah, so we
center,
drove by it, right? We
Yeah.
drove by it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the
Yeah.
other
Parallel to-
library that I think is pretty cool looking right now, I'm guessing tours aren't happening because it's not open yet, is Marlboro. Again, lots of glass, and it's a, really old building. It's Carnegie Library. But they got state aid too, and they're, pretty much, I'm guessing they probably maybe have 6 more months to go on that project, but it's really pretty spectacular.
It's still in construction?
It is, yeah.
What's interesting about all of them was the glass, like in Woburn, you look, it's a big glass building, but it's a very small percentage of it is actually glass, but it's kind of how it's laid out. And then in the West Branch, it was very inviting going in, and then the glass was very transparent going out. And then all of them had more rusticated materials closer to the entrance, and so there was kind of a hierarchy of finishes. So the more closer it is to human touch and where you go in, the more focused it was on the natural materials.
And
It was very helpful. I'm glad we did it.
Yeah,
Good.
we love to hear all these like super engaging comments. It's really kind of rewarding to just even do that exercise in
Yeah.
general.
Yeah, and kudos to all of you for taking the time out of your day and work schedules to make it happen, because I know that was no small effort. You'll see more of West Branch and Concord, but I think, at West Branch, given the context and the scale of the addition, we were able to basically justify using the copper cladding because it was quite limited in the amount of it.
Yeah,
But to your point, Andrew, when we walked into Woburn, there was copper just above you in the canopy. So it was, these natural materials that just feel a little bit more tangible, a little bit more human. We can use them more subtly. And in the Concord example, we used a lot of the stone, and we went to great lengths to make that stone kind of feel integrated with the landscape features. But the overall cladding, the board and batten was frankly quite driven by economics. I mean, we couldn't clad that thing in a super expensive material. So we used, basically a hardy board material and just used it in a sort of non-typical way to give it a bit more character and interest. So, we're imagining a balancing act of using, some more expensive natural materials where it counts the most, and then looking at more sort of strategic use of, lower tier materials, still, long lasting, but not all natural materials in other locations.
What's the maintenance like on that part, the board part?
Similar to wood in that it needs to
Okay.
be repainted,
Mhm.
every 10, 15 years or so. So that is a maintenance issue
Mhm.
to keep tabs on. Copper is quite different. I mean, it can last decades with really no maintenance. And the same with stone.
I guess we'll move on to John's update from Collins.
I think we skipped that, right?
Oh,
Or
where's
that's-
community? Sorry, wrong one.
That's for the main building.
Well, community input was something that Melissa had asked to be put on the agenda regarding getting community feedback about, input for what they want to see in the library. So I guess, is there any plan going forward to get input from the community?
So right at the beginning of our presentation, we do have a community meeting shown here. We're thinking middle of July. We'd have a community meeting more to provide them with an update where all of us as a committee could go and provide that update. And we think that's the best kind of place for that. We'll be just done with design development. We'll have another estimate in our hand.
I think,
There's gonna be a need to do something before that, though,
yeah, I guess,
based on what, I'm sorry, go ahead.
well, I was just gonna inquire, what is the input that we're hoping to receive from the community?
Well, I think one of the biggest pushbacks was the glass. And so a big reason why we had this exterior design committee was to get more input from community members, but also listen again to what the community is looking for. So in my head, I thought it would kind of be like a presentation of what the group had talked about to present to the community as like an updated design to get their input on it. Does
I
anybody
feel like
have
there's
any-
a very narrow window of between being far enough along to share something, but early enough to take in input. Because you don't want to show something that hasn't really been developed. But if you wait till the design is completely finished, then you're really just giving an update, not having a chance to change anything.
Are we able to put our schedule on the screen so that we can talk about the timing?
Presentation.
Just a seat down there.
For, I
Is it a
guess,
slide for?
Yeah,
Melissa, we were just starting to talk about community input and
Okay.
feedback.
And we
So,
want to look at the schedule, is that what?
yeah, we just
perfect.
started. Yeah.
That's perfect.
Yes.
you're telling, you're telling.
You mentioned community input, were there meetings before and how many people turned out? I mean, this opposition that you referred to, was it 10 really loud people or is it half the town? I mean, how
was
do
more
we
than
know there
10.
was a really good sense of the whole?
Yeah, we definitely had focus groups that people attended and their take was that there was too much glass. Now, I couldn't put a number on it, but it wasn't half the town, but it was more than 10 people. And so kind of, yeah, go ahead Denise.
So I just wanted, I mean, there was the belief that because it's the historic center, the glass was not historic enough to maintain the character. So we had a number of folks come up and say they support the library. They didn't necessarily support what it looks like. And that is the sole reason why we have an exterior design committee, was to solicit some community feedback. And at the end of the day, it's still this group. And if we decide glass is what we're doing, but we owe it to the community to gather some additional feedback, have another, I mean, we had public meetings, quite candidly, no one came. And so we did provide opportunity, but there was still such opposition going up to the ballot that I said, if you support this project, we will continue to solicit feedback and listen to you as we go through this process. So we do have to gauge community input. And if people don't want to participate, if people don't want to provide feedback, but at least we can say we've done some due diligence and followed through with the promises that allowed them to vote in favor of this project.
So, but they were looking at preliminary designs or?
Yeah, we had a preliminary
So-
design.
It seems to me also that once there's a more solid design, the designers can explain, but really in depth, their thinking, and maybe some people who are just knee-jerk reacting to glass can understand reasons for having. I mean, you know, as a material, it's not new. It's been around since Beacon Hill was first populated. So
Right, oh, I absolutely think so. And I think, like I said, at the end of the day, we've given opportunities. I actually reached out to some of those people when we posted the exterior design committee and said, now's your chance.
Mhm.
Not one person stepped forward to be on the committee and actually be part of the decision making. But again, I feel that we have done everything we possibly could to include as many people in this process. And as I said, if they choose not to provide feedback, choose not to come to meetings, they can't say we didn't try. So I'm not opposed to whatever is decided that the building looks like, as long as we've given opportunity for people to have another say in the process, if they want to.
And we did have like many community feedback meetings before the preliminary design. So that was actually really well. I thought there were a lot of people that
There's a lot of
participated and this group did a good job of soliciting feedback in multiple different ways, like electronic feedback or on boards, like just in various different ways. So all of that stuff helped to inform the decision of a lot of like the layout or like, you know, that kind of thing, like how much space we're going
It's
to
mostly
need.
programmatic.
It was programmatic
in
feedback,
its-
exactly.
So I mean, we didn't really get into any feedback process from the broader community on the character
Yeah.
of the addition. So if that's the goal, we can totally accommodate it. But I think the critical question for the building committees are we, when I say we, is the design team intended to change course or react to that feedback? Or are we merely, I shouldn't say merely, but are we providing an update and description on why we've landed where we landed, and we're going to stay that course? And just if it's the first, and we need to put options out to the community and be prepared to, alter course or change course based on that, it really needs to happen in this phase, in the design development phase that we're kicking off right now. This phase, there's still opportunity to react and to move things, both building elements inside the building and the character of the addition. Once we shift gears here into CDs, that is really us, drawing, documenting, coordinating with our engineering team and getting the set ready to go out to bid in October. We had targeted a community meeting in the early CD phase, but that was just intended to be an update. Here's the design of your new library. It's coming. Here's the schedule. We're going to bid in the fall, but it was not intended for us to say, okay, wait a second, we're getting this type of feedback, and it's the building committee, the exterior building committee needs to take that into consideration and tell us how they want to react to it. If that's what we're expecting, then we need to be thinking about it sooner rather than later. And you'll see some updates on the exterior of the character of the building today, but we were intending to come our next workshop with you all in a few weeks, the beginning of May. That's where we were intending to come to this, to a meeting with the building committees and present schemes of what the exterior of the building could actually look like, different compositions.
So is that multiple schemes you plan to present, that then we could take that to the public and say, here are the options that are being put forward?
There variations of schemes, yes. I don't think, we're not gonna come to the table and be like, there's an all glass scheme or there's an all wood scheme. It's gonna be, different compositions that are, kind of slightly a little bit more glass in this one, a little bit more wood in this one, a little bit more stone in that one. That was the intention of our process.
Yeah, Frank.
That's actually an excellent thing to bring to the public, because, when you have sort of a set idea and you have the different materials, that really changes what it looks like. I mean, just from my experience, to bring that to people, oh, I don't like well, yeah, but we're gonna use this fabric, we're gonna use this material. Oh, but that's something completely different, so, it changes their view of it. So I think that's not a bad time to bring it out. You don't have to think about complete redesign of the building.
You mean presenting a couple of options of materials to the public for them to weigh in on, is that
To collect feedback.
collect feedback?
Yeah, because I think that really affects your perspective of the whole
Yeah.
thing, and looking at it, but so.
Can we talk about this in relationship to what I think will be a big reveal about the budget? Because if there's the situation where we're gonna have to go back to the town to ask for more money, I think that should be preceded by a opportunity to give feedback. Because if we lay it out and say, here's the building, don't you love it? And by the way, we need X more dollars. I think that might bristle some people a little bit, rather than having said, what do you think about this? Whether or not you decide to change it or we decide to change it is one thing, but informing rather than asking opinion are two different things. And I think we could alienate people by just saying, this is it, love it or leave it, and we need more money. If indeed we do need more money.
There's two estimates listed there. Is one of them underway?
We will get one tonight.
Oh,
We actually have 3 estimates during this design. So we just finished one, and we'll show that tonight. And then we'll have another one at the end of design development, and then we'll have another one at around 50% CDs.
I think that it was a really great suggestion to have the ability to have that additional feedback after the meeting. I just worry that the feedback is going to be, I don't like it, which is not feedback, right? So I worry that it's just going to be an opinion of dislike rather than a constructive conversation about what could make some percentage of the population happy. And I think that's the challenging part, because although I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, I just don't know how we then move on from that, because, there's no project on earth that everybody likes, and maybe that needs to be okay at some point down the road anyway. So,
Go ahead, Denise.
So it would have to just be okay at some point. I mean, that's what this group is charged with, is approving the design. So if we do our due diligence and they say, if 3 people show up and say, I still don't like it, then we have to weigh that against the people that still supported the project, understand we need a new building. And we have to live with that we are gonna make the decision that, you know, we heard from people, but at the end of the day, this is what we think is in the best interest of the community. We will have to make that decision based on whatever feedback you hear and how you choose to make a decision.
Just curious if with the facade designs, is there going to be not like a cost estimate, but like, you know, oh, wouldn't it be fabulous if we could cover all this and this, that, and the other material, but it's really not going to be within budget to do that. Like, you're not going to present us something that is untenable in terms of
No,
accounting wise.
no, that's not,
Yeah,
no, absolutely, that's not our intention.
Yeah.
I mean, we would. And even for what we intend to present to you all here in a few weeks, they would be variations on a palette
Yeah.
that would all be achievable from a budget perspective.
Awesome.
That is our goal.
can the public part of the meeting be inviting people to come to this meeting and have not a way for them all to stand up and share their feedback, but like a written form or a, you know, a Google document or something that people could fill out, and then it's, you know, it's already in our schedules. It's not an additional time. Everybody has to drive out here, all that other stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we
guess
could
that's what we're
do,
talking
we
about.
could do a number of things. I mean, we could even use Zoom. We could set up the question, yes, no, do you like this option? Yes, no. Every meeting is
Or
public,
just like hands raised
Yeah,
or something.
but we actually put a question, do you like this design? Vote yes, vote no. We have a voting option.
Right, no, I
But-
know every meeting is public, but the way we publicize it
Exactly.
would be different, right?
Exactly.
You might send out one of the all town bulletins, please come,
We
share
would love
your-
your feedback.
yes.
Yep.
I mean, that's an idea, and if we have to do a separate meeting, that's totally fine, but if we were to do that, say mid-May, around, and I'm sorry, there's a lot of information up there, but, say mid-May, around our workshop 4, we do use online tools all the time to solicit feedback, so, you know, we're doing it right now on another project. I mean, Google has a whole range of survey options and ways that you can format surveys online, so we could give like the preview in workshop 4, either as part of this meeting or a separate meeting, and then set a follow-up, like, you know, with QR codes and everything you can put on your website, the library's website, and say like, hey, if you want to provide additional feedback, go to this website, you got 2 weeks to do it. And we can, you know, collect all the data, sort it, figure out, you know, how we want to react to it.
So it sounds like it's important to get the feedback. Also sounds like this is the group that makes decisions. I'd be concerned if there's a voting option, that gets the perception that whoever shows up and votes gets that. And if there's a winning one that this group doesn't agree with, that could be a problem. If the,
Who would be voting?
I
Well,
don't
if
know,
we put it out to
whoever
the
decided
public.
to show up that night, I mean,
Well-
it's not a town vote.
Well, it couldn't be because this committee is charged with.
Right, yeah,
That
so
that has to be made clear.
I'm saying the format of voting, the format of input shouldn't be just a vote on the options. It could be a soliciting priorities from the group, like what's most important, the exterior beauty, the access, the matching historic, or any kind of, we give a range, or it could be totally open-ended. And what's most important to you about this? And then this group takes that into account. In terms of timing, looks like for the, are you doing a 50% DD set? Is that a deliverable, or is that just kind of?
It's an
Internal
internal
benchmark.
benchmark.
But I mean, those are sometimes great, because then, you know, everything's moving in different phases. You know, nothing is all done at the same time, except when you make a drawing set. So that might be a good time you might have a couple of views, probably have good plans and probably good reasons for why it's organized. And then the types of decisions that can be made are percentage of glass, types of materials. It could be the position of an entrance and an overall massing. You know, do you go through the community room, and how does that work kind of after hours? And those are things that are not going to radically redesign, but just things that might get input from the community that we might not be thinking of, being so close to the process.
Melissa? I feel like we're behind on this, and I'm gonna pass this out because I spent time doing it, and it's really, there are only enough copies for the people on the external design committee. But I had a plan and put together to collect community feedback. And if you would just flip over the first page and turn to the page that, I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. Can you send one back to us?
I'll come around. On the second page, there says proposed postcard front. And so what I was thinking, not necessarily mailing to everyone in town, but on the following pages, there are pictures of easels that could be put up in different places. Let's see, one for the library, one for the community center, and then also possibly an admin newspaper, all having QR codes, but the postcards would be something that could be filled out and left at the
Are
library.
you proposing to use these drawings? in a
No,
postcard?
I'm not
Oh,
proposing to use these drawings. I just had it, they're in there as place
got it. Okay.
holders.
So you would put actual,
I was hoping that we would
Schematics from-
have schemes that we could put in there. The problem is I wanted to start this a month and a half ago.
well, I just wanted, I think another way, not an additional way to approach this is, we've seen examples of historic buildings with contemporary additions. Some of you have been to some, right? But they're all over the place. You could walk from here to Boston and find a lot of historic buildings with contemporary additions. And I think it would perhaps behoove us to use that as another tool in our toolbox to explain this, because they exist already.
But that doesn't mean the town wants it. I mean, it's really up to the
But-
town.
No, I know that, but giving, I understand it, but giving concrete
Well,
examples.
I mean, one of them can be the all glass structure, if that's, an option. If that's what you want is, to put out there. And this is more very rough, and what do you like about this? What don't you like about this? They could put, I don't like all the glass, or someone can put, I don't want any more brick, or, it's intended to solicit something other than I don't like it, which,
Right, well, I think that's important.
Offer a suggestion.
Yes.
So on that line of thought, I mean, we very easily, within a week, could have an online platform in which we do share examples of buildings that are historic with additions that we could put out there as our first round of, hey, here are some examples of new contemporary additions on historic buildings. What do you like about them? That could be like the first round of
They
feedback.
would be contemporary additions to historic buildings. I wouldn't lead with that. I mean, I don't think it's fair to lead with that. I think we should, offer everything at the same time.
I'm a little perplexed because since our very first SD kickoff workshop 3 months ago, we've been presenting examples of how we would propose to compose an addition using historic context and features of the historic building to help inform the design of a new addition.
Right. And I'm not saying it should look like the current building. I'm just saying I think we need to give people a few options.
I like the simplicity of the options. And having something really parallel where people can kind of see differences between them. My concern about this format is that the amount of information in it is similar to what was, I mean, it's exactly the same, but even if the views were updated, is this enough information about the specific building to have people distinguish between the nuances of the different options? Because it could come down to like, I like modern buildings, I don't like modern, it's like a matter of taste.
Right.
Versus if this were done in a forum, it was a public meeting in which Design Lab was able to present, show the ideas, the plans and the context in a way that hadn't been presented before, because the design is genuinely further along than in the first initial designs, then that might get more informed and nuanced and And
And I'm not
less
saying we shouldn't
reactionary
have
kind of-
forums. I think
yeah.
we should still have forums, but the problem I think with forums is that we can't reach everyone that way. We can't reach seniors who don't want to drive at night. We can't reach young parents who have to be home with their kids in the evening. You know, my experience with forums is you get sort of that middle crowd that doesn't have to be home with the kids and
You
is
wanna-
able to.
You want to maximize the
Well,
reach.
and yeah, and I don't know that, I want us to make sure we include all the population.
But I think we do, because every meeting is available on Zoom and people can tune in. Everything is on our website. People can watch every meeting that we have. No one's watching them. I can see the count of our YouTube videos. I can see how many people have signed up on the library renovation page to follow the project. I agree, because I was the one who said we needed the community input. I don't think the community cares as much as we may think they do,
I
because they
think
voted
they'll
for it.
care after it's done, and that's my fear.
I don't think so. I think they'll care and then say, oh my God, we have this beautiful new library. I think they'll care for a half a second and then say, oh my God, it's so worth the wait. And it was because I can see people aren't following us. People aren't paying attention to these meetings like we thought they would.
Well, don't you think that if we had an easel in the entrance of the library?
But we
people would get
did.
noticed?
We did that through the whole preliminary design. We
I
had
know, but
easels.
it wasn't about the facade of the, and it worked. We got response at those easels.
Well, the easels, the easels were asking people what sorts of spaces they wanted in an ideal library from their own perspective. It really didn't ask a lot about how they felt about the exterior,
Right.
because we were looking at programming creation at that point.
And I didn't think people cared about the exterior as much as we thought they did. So this is why we're doing this. And now we're not getting it as much input as we thought we would. And I think my concern is maybe not similar, and correct me if I'm wrong, but to me, if Design Lab came back and said, here's 3 options, and we gave it to the public and said, give us your input, I think that is still involving them. They don't know what they don't know. I don't know. I'm learning copper versus whatever other materials. I'm learning a lot. And to me, it's kind of giving people, it would be similar to giving people input on what rug I put in or what color paint I do. And now you're drawing a very thin line, because it may not be practical. And I think if they're working within a budget to say, this is what we can provide you within the budget, then maybe that's the way to go.
I agree with you.
Yeah,
I
sorry.
just wanted to say that I agree with that, and I also kind of feel the way that Marcy and Denise do, as far as like, I feel like the townspeople have had ample opportunity to be involved in this, and they still do. And there's still ongoing opportunity to be involved in this by watching meetings and being involved or coming and, you know, saying a piece. But my husband's an engineer, and I know that if things get too sticky and there's too many opinions and there's too much going on, it's gonna make this process a lot more complicated and draw it out a lot more. And I think the town definitely doesn't want that. Because then you're talking about different budgets and different things and different issues, and it just becomes very complicated very quickly.
I again think to Andrew's point too, it's just like if we do this much outreach, it makes it seem like it's another vote. And it's really not.
I think we have to agree on what it is we're looking for in terms of feedback. Are we looking for feedback, or are we looking to simply inform about where we are in the process? And that will help decide like what actions we
And I
should
think
take.
maybe that's changed. I think initially I thought it would be input. But I don't think people are interested enough or know enough to give that. I don't know. Yes, Melissa?
You know, I come from a marketing background, and I don't think people are aware of these meetings. I don't think they've signed up to get alerts on the website, but I do think if they see the building go up and they don't like it, they're going to say, when was I asked for my opinion? I mean, I know it's frustrating to you that people don't attend these meetings, but the generals, the typical Stowite is not aware of that these decisions are being made. And I think we have to reach out to them instead of expecting them to come to us. I watched Central School go up, And when it was done, I said, oh my God, that's what it looks like. And I live around the corner from it. And every time I drive by, I say, boy, I wish I had been involved in that. And of course, there were opportunities for me to be involved. I went to 1 or 2 situations, but I didn't know. And I wish they had picked, basically just a different color scheme or whatever. But I look at it, and that's why I'm here, because I want the library to be something that I feel like people had an opportunity to comment on the look of.
If you don't mind me interjecting into this, I think it would be helpful if we got through our exterior presentation so that you guys can see where we're at and all of the decisions that we still need to make. And then we can decide on what decisions we'd like to open up to the community. Because you'll see that we still have a lot of decisions we need to make. And that workshop 4 is going to be a big important decision maker for us, especially regarding materials and ratios of materials. Because today we're mostly going to be talking about massing and shapes and sizes. And so I think it's important for us to understand before we actually decide on how to engage the community, that we understand what we're going to engage the community for. So if you don't mind.
Yep. So I'll move on to John first.
Why don't we,
No.
why don't we swap them?
Okay,
So that we can stick with
Yeah.
the conversation,
All
if I can make that recommendation.
okay. Then I'll hand it over to Design Lab.
If you wouldn't mind jumping back 1 slide to the schedule, we'll just briefly go over the schedule.
Go back go to slide 3. I just want to make sure that we introduce our new team member, Audrey. She's from Design Lab as well. She's joined the team with Andrew and I. She's a key collaborator, brings a lot of expertise. She just came off a big renovation project at Wellesley, the historic building. And as our process gets more and more developed and more involved, our team is growing. So Audrey is a welcome addition.
Welcome.
So we just finished a major milestone. We finished the schematic design set. So that is kind of a bit tighter than like broad stroke ideas. We had dimensions on there, we had areas, we had some materials covered so that we knew we could get a general idea of costs in there. We also got alternates for those materials, so we weren't stuck to one. Even though we sent one in, we asked for other material options as well. And we just finished that estimate. We officially got the final one yesterday. In there was also the cistern discussion. We developed that further with the civil engineer and the fire protection engineer. The landscape drawings were also developed much further based on our previous conversations. So there was a lot in there. We worked very hard on that set, and as well in the last 5 weeks almost since we met you last, we've been developing further. So now we're at workshop 3. And if you for the next slides, we're now in the design development phase, which we're going to be looking a little closer at everything in this building. We're generally more at the room scale if you're looking at a floor plan, and more at the kind of massing material scale in the exterior. So we'll have 3 workshops this time. Last in schematics, we only had 2. It was a very tight turnaround. This is also a tight turnaround, but we have a bit more time to develop. We have additional manpower as well on this, and so this is kind of how these projects go. We also will be engaging the town department meeting, or the town departments, in the next few weeks to meet with the fire department, the police department, and some others that we may consider, to meet with our engineers as well. So we can tie up a few loose ends that we may have. And then we're going to have staff interviews again to get feedback from the staff once again, which was extremely helpful in SDs. And so we'd like to get their feedbacks on schemes that we've been developing together. And then, of course, we may have a community engagements moment in between 4 and 5, but at the end of DD, we are going to get another estimate so we can tighten this up some more.
You can go ahead.
Yeah. So we're going to start with the exterior committee. We're gonna hold on the estimate reveal until the middle. I apologize for that.
Reveal. Is there a balloon we get to pop?
Yeah.
I already feel like I feel like we're gonna have to
It's a
We did have a moment in here, the next slides, to discuss the field trip. I think we've heard the feedback on that. So just keep those projects in mind while we're going over these. Wouldn't mind going forwards. 2 slides. So these are the, would you mind zooming out? We're gonna be filling the screen here. So last time we developed some guiding principles. We've added a few more here that came from our previous discussions. So the verticality and the rhythm are important characteristics to carry from the historic building. You'll remember that diagram that kind of built and grew with those characteristics that we saw in the historic building. And also that the gasket should create a separation from the historic building. That has a clearly creates a differentiation while being complementary. So just some brief context images, if you wouldn't mind moving forward. Sorry.
I know, I'm like right next
this
to him, like,
happened
next
recently, yeah, I
slide,
see, I
next
see.
slide.
I see Kat very engaged.
Sorry, let's just go, because this is such a hot topic, let's just click back to the guiding principles and just pause there. Do those all resonate with everybody at this table? Or are there?
I think they're resonating differently with me than they are with anyone else, because I say, I think it's really important that the character be rooted in the context that defines Stowe. I see that as a big glass
But what-
box.
How do you,
doesn't fit.
Can I
you
just,
get 6 people and 8 different definitions of what defines Stowe? I mean, that to me is, you could swing that in so many different ways. I mean, there's no one way to define Stowe or one context.
Well, we can ask experts of who lives in the community or who knows the community, what they feel about who makes up this community. It's made up of some farmers. It's made up of a lot of people that have been here a long time. I've been here 27 years. I feel like, that we're trying to build a lower village that's, in context of town, and this building was built to echo the other old building. And this building isn't that old, to echo the other old town hall. This is what we had a huge argument over this stone building that was on the property of the center school. I don't know how many people here remember that, it wasn't that long ago. A huge argument about tearing down this old Apple storage building. It totally disrupted the community because people wanted to keep that. It was so important to them to have that old stone building on the property. So those are the kind of things I've been through in the time that I've lived in Stowe. And that to me tells me that people that live here have an opinion on how these buildings should look, and they're not interested in having something that looks drastically different than what's already here.
Go ahead, Denise.
But I would also say that in the last 3 to 5 years, the community has changed and we've had a lot of new people in town. And I think some of the newer families may not feel the same. So we have to find a way to blend the new and the old, because that's what our community is.
Well, okay, but how do we know what the new, we have to get that community in, but how do we know what the new families want?
Well, I think we have a lot sitting around the table.
I moved to Harvard Acres because it's a contemporary modern development.
Okay.
And I mean, if everybody wanted anything to look like farmhouses 50 years ago, 40 years ago when that was built, it wouldn't exist. And I can't afford like the same kind of neighborhood in Concord. And those are much more pure and they're much more modern, and they're designed by architects that we've heard of. And this was, a little bit more suburban, but I think it's something that is a contemporary aesthetic which still fits very much in the setting of a rural neighborhood. And I think it's beautiful and humble and refined and modern. And I think the community is really grown because there's a lot of old things in the community, but the population doubled 50 years ago. And so it's really changed. There are farms, a lot of farms still, golf courses. But a lot of those farms are turned into developments. And they're not big glass boxes. They're not, but they're contemporary. And I think that's a beautiful neighborhood that has a really modern aesthetic through it. And I think that's a big part of stuff.
Well, I would say that the new homes that I see going up are not.
I don't like those new homes.
style. Well, yeah, I mean, it's an opinion thing, and I
Those new
do
homes-
think we need to see the designs, but I just wanted to say that, I think we can have different opinions about these things.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And
just
I agree
consensus
with
is
them, but
unanimous.
someone else agrees with them in a different way.
So, I mean, if we do this, if we do a community engagement effort, I mean, one of the questions can be that. Tell us what you think the character is that defines Stowe. And we will get a range of options and feedback, just like we're hearing today. And our job is to react to that and accommodate it in a way that appeases as many folks as we can.
And do we have time for that?
We'll have to-
No, I know
We'll have
we
to be
don't.
very direct. I mean, I guess, I mean, we're reacting to this all right now, but I mean, if that's the level of engagement we need to do, then we can accommodate it. But your comment is absolutely right. The sooner this thing gets done and designed and out and bid, the better off the town will be from a cost perspective. We're already seeing some of that, which you'll see here in a moment with our current cost estimate. But let's get through this, and then we can talk about what level of engagement do we want to get the community, and what are the questions, what are we asking of them, and we'll do everything that we possibly can to accommodate that.
I think it's also important to know that you can honor the past in different ways, right? And it does not have to just be about the exact addition to the library. There's other ways the library can honor the past. And I've lived here for 13 years. And I've always found it comical that when people go around a table in Stowe and introduce themselves, they always talk about how long they've lived here, because that's a badge of honor for people. But I would think if you've only lived here for 6 months, you're allowed to have the same amount of an opinion as somebody that's lived here for 60 years. And I think that that's really an important distinction for us to be considering.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's really important.
I'd like to jump to the context a little bit here. And kind of what we've been working on. It's a bit of a review of last time, where if you wouldn't. mind
One
going to the
slide
next
forward.
slide.
We're
So
gonna get you a bell.
we analyzed the existing historic building. We kind of went through a Richardsonian Romanesque 101. Richardsonian Romanesque, like I said, is very important American style. It's the first American style, considered the first American style. It's rooted in monumentality and stability, and kind of represents America in that way. And this building is very much a Richardsonian Romanesque building, with these kind of 5 guiding characters. And so, next slide, please. We took some of those characters and some of the rhythm and stretched that across the building, and that's been it was kind of a driver for us to consider when thinking about the massing. And in the next few weeks, we'll be considering these more as we dive into deeper detail within this. But today, next slide, please, we're going to be talking about more of the massing structure.
Can you just
Yes.
define gasket to me? Is that like a
The
barrier
space
wall,
between.
space
The
between?
connection.
Yeah, it's almost like an airlock between, like it's conceptually, so that you're not slamming right into the building the way that the current edition does.
Okay.
It's
a more.
It's,
discreet
yeah,
connection.
it's really important for us and for this design to separate from the existing building and create something that is differentiated and physically as well separated, so that we don't once kind of slam into it, but also fight with it. We don't want to be fighting with the existing building at all.
So can I ask a quick question about that? So like your West Branch Library example, that is kind of built into the existing structure. Is
So
that correct?
the way I can go into West Branch for a very long time, but the way we kind of worked with that idea is we actually pushed it behind mostly the existing building, so we
Okay.
weren't fighting. So
Okay.
from most angles on West Branch, you can't see the addition.
Right, okay, gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Next slide, please. So we went through an enormous amount of massing models here, physically cutting these down. Audrey did an enormous amount of these. If you wouldn't mind.
Sure.
kind of plugging and playing. We put them on the screen so that anybody on Zoom.
Is there any way that we
can join.
could see each of them separately?
We've narrowed it down on the
Oh,
next few slides, so we're not going to talk about 12 of them, but we've got 4 that we want to talk about. And the intention for these, as Andrew said, is to look at the building massing and also the roof form.
And so we really started with something that was more of an extrusion of what the plan is. I'll just stand behind.
It's on the screen too.
So really just taking what we're looking at in the plans and just bringing it up and looking at like a flat roof. And still trying to follow with the horizontal datums that the existing building does bring over. So you're able to like follow the lines all the way across. And so it's starting to respond to the existing. But we quickly realized that having such a flat plane doesn't talk as well with the existing building.
I'll just point out to your question about the gasket. So we're thinking about this zone where my finger is differently than the primary volume of the addition. And in these next schemes that Audrey's about to drop on, we're even starting to think about the addition sort of kind of three ways. So there's the kind of the gasket, there's the primary volume of the main addition, and then there's sort of the secondary volume that is defined by the footprint of the community room.
Right, and so the next iteration we did of that, if you go to the next slide, please. Started to break down those volumes a bit more, starting to respond to the slope of what the existing roof is and try and talk with that, but keeping a little bit more of a distance between the different volumes.
Because this roof of Randall is just such a prominent feature. All of that slate, the steep angles, you see it from any angle, any distance that roof is there. A totally flat roof condition didn't feel like it was reacting to the context and that feature of the existing building enough. There wasn't enough dialogue between the new and old.
And then we took that one step further. If you go to the next one, please. And started to pull that same the same roof style into like the children's and the community room volume as well. But that also would then start to play with like the volume of the children's area. So being able to see the shape of the roof from the inside. So you're able to see some
some vaulted spaces and
West Somerville,
yeah, potentially, but just, the nature of this, we're gaining a little bit of height so that we could have taller ceilings on the upper level, and those taller ceilings could start to relate, to the spaces within them, either children's or whatever the case may be. And you'll see.
It's also in, sorry. It's also in direct conversation with the existing building because the roof eave actually shifts as you break over the historic entrance, and it goes up on the other side. So it's the same way, same thing
Can you
happens
just
in the
flip
back.
it this way just for us to see that?
Yeah,
Let me
sorry.
find just one quickly.
Can I just ask?
Sure.
Okay, now I can see. It's not gonna be taller. than the original building?
No,
Okay.
I don't think so. It just,
Yeah.
it doesn't, and it's helpful always with these to get down
Yeah.
and look at it as if you're at eye level, so you gotta kind of hold this up and take a spin around it. But because this thing is perched on Library Hill and this is kind of into the hill more, it'll be lower, and it needs to be, because we don't want to compete with that. And just programmatically, we don't need that space. Another consistency with all these that I want to talk about on the topic of the gasket, it doesn't make sense to take this higher roof level at whatever height that is, either what's modeled here or even a few feet down, and try to send it directly into this roof, right? With this hipped, and then even, there are these little transom windows here that are probably hard for everybody to see, but trying to get the roof of the new addition to tie into that becomes very technically complex. And frankly, in our opinion, unnecessary. Like we want that zone, that low flat roof between new and old. So there's a very clear distinction and sort of a delicate connection, if you will. And we're also thinking strategically in that there will be, we think, rooftop equipment that we'll need to be thinking about. So there's potential to bury it in this if this becomes an attic, but more likely it's going to be perched on a roof with some sort of screen. And we don't want to see that from the common or anywhere. So that's why we're starting to think about this low roof, tucking behind a higher roof to create that sort of screened condition.
Can I just mention that when, and Tina will have some pictures of this probably at the next meeting, but 117 is here.
Correct.
And unless you're right at the stop sign, this is not your view. So your view is really always going to be along here. Just to keep that in mind, that these are going to be important.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thoughts.
Yep. No, we know. And we're getting there. And you'll start to see some plans that kind of react to that. Like this view, even though the building, faces this way, and this is the primary elevation of the historic building, this is kind of the primary view that most people are going to experience the addition and then the historic building, which is why, another reason why we've tried to pull this back to reveal the tower, let that be the predominant anchoring feature, and the building sit back from that in a very different way than the current addition works in the building, where it kind of consumes that tower and just frankly makes a mess of the historic composition.
Can you just say something about as you start to go from that massive box of the first demonstration down, like how are we compromising usable space in the interior? If we are at all?
We're not at all. This, as Audrey said, I mean, this is basically taking the plan layout that we have. We've started to express that community room as a slightly distinct volume from the main one. And it's just pulling it up the 2 levels and giving us higher space for the second level here, higher ceilings, I should say, but it's not reducing any footprint.
Okay.
It's not saying, none of these are saying we can achieve this in plan, but we can't achieve that space. They're all including everything that we've talked about to this point.
But like this one, I mean, aren't you gonna run into like the side wall? Like it's gonna be the wall slanted, not just the roof.
Yeah, if we went down this route, yes,
Okay.
or we build slightly vertical, we build vertical walls just inside the slope. So inside you wouldn't feel that, but
Okay.
yeah, if we went down something like that, I mean, but that would be something we'd kind of do purposefully. Like we want to experience that slope roof and we integrate it in a way that is kind of strategic and feels appropriate.
And we have one more
Again, a little stuff.
Yeah. And so this last one that we have, we actually do have some changes on for the, sorry. Okay, so this one we do have multiple options for the floor plans, which we'll talk about later. But this massing really tries to minimize the way that we're connecting with the existing building. So we've got, you keep the same language of having a gasket here in this same area, but still pulling it further down and back so that we're not touching any of the building that,
Yeah.
It's not as close to the turret, is that what you're saying?
it's not as close to the turret and it's not impacting these like windows and the
Windows
doors.
are
Right.
Yeah, you can actually see on the screen pretty clearly that we push back here. And so it's just like she was saying, it's as delicate a touch as we can in this one scheme, and then it actually gets around. You can see in the model that I think we have the doors and windows model there in that one, that it goes around those and under them instead of over. And so it keeps those on the exterior.
And that, it doesn't matter how big the gasket is either, I mean, it doesn't have to be as deep.
It's
I don't know
actually
what's
the
going on
same,
inside.
it's the same depth. We have a plan, so actually specifically for this one, just to show you what the outcome would be of cutting that.
The other thing that's happening here in this model is, it's subtle, but there is a slight difference in that the meeting room is getting pulled out a little bit further to create a bit more of a court here on the ground plane. And a bit more visibility to that kind of key view, so that this is kind of a known feature of the library, and it's got a presence onto the common.
I can't tell if that's cut out or like plastic there. It's just a little optical illusion. Is that where the door would be to that space, or where do you envision the door being on these ideas?
We have a little tiny door model.
Oh, okay.
Oh my God, it's so cute.
You can also
love
kind
that.
of see it in the images on the screen as well.
I apologize, I have to step out, just before I do, it's generally like the direction this is going. I think the kind of hierarchy of massing, you can tell from the model, which tells you the model's worth 1,000 pictures. That is kind of echoing or recalling the asymmetry in the hierarchy of the original building in an interesting way. And I think that's important. I like the courtyard right there. I think if there's multiple hip roofs, then you're losing some of that hierarchy.
Yeah.
So I think the direction that these are evolving is going in a good direction. Great, looking forward to seeing that.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Andrew.
thank you, Andrew. So I think on the next slide, we've got kind of all four of them together, and we can come back to this model. This is going to show up at future meetings, and we can refer to it again later this evening when we look at the plans.
Actually, I thought somebody asked a question, but it didn't come out the way I thought. The part that's clear, why is it clear? On one model, but not the others. What does that represent?
I guess these are sketch models for us, that one particularly. We put a window in for what you'll see in plan later is kind of a representation of something we're thinking, but we're not entirely sold on like a huge double height window in that corner.
But it's implying a sort of a visual connection to the common in some capacity. That's not saying it's all glass in the corner like it's represented here, but it's an important comment. And we've had to get out of this, at least I should say, I have had to get out of this train of thought, because this building is very front facing, but that faces Library Hill Road. It does not face the common or the intersection. So, we've been thinking more about the addition in that context, and the landscape reflects it too, that we'll click to in a minute. But like this is kind of the moment. So that's why we're starting to hint in our plans. One of our plan schemes talks to that, like that's the sort of community gesture.
Absolutely.
So anyway, let's keep going, because there's much more to get through.
So we're not, in this meeting, we're not really looking for opinions on materials as much as massings. But we just want to give you some reference into what we're thinking again. So we have the kind of historic context based on the building complementing these materials. We have brick and slate and sandstone and very patinaed copper.
And very dirty sandstone.
And very dirty sandstone, yeah.
Bird mess and all.
And then the next slide is kind of some of these materials you've seen, but this is how we're kind of thinking about it and thinking about the building in general as a base, a field, and a cap. The base is kind of sticking to that Richardsonian Romanesque idea of stability and monumentality with stone or brick or kind of a different bond pattern of each or a different color to complement the existing brick, something like that. The field is a more or a natural material, potentially more contemporary, potentially more transparent or opaque. You'll see, and then the cap is that hipped roof that we're mostly showing. So here we have slate and a mix of metal roofs here, or potentially not a cap and a flat roof that, so the field goes all the way up to the edge. And so this is kind of what we've been imagining when looking at these, but we're not considering these yet until we nail down the massing a bit more. At this point now, it's not always this way, but we're thinking that the massing should inform the materials more.
And the internal plan arrangement. So we feel pretty good about
And the internal, yeah.
where we're headed in the plans that you'll see here in a moment, but it's fair to say, I just want to be like super abundantly clear, like we are not proposing an all glass box. And while we haven't dialed in yet on the actual composition, we are, for the field anyway, so the kind of base at the bottom, the field is is this bit, and then there's a cap. For the field, we're not thinking, sort of a uniform material. It's not all wood, it's not all glass, it's not all slate, it's not all masonry. It's going to be some strategic combination of those in a composition that makes sense. So I guess knowing that, like, is there any like super strong objections to what you're seeing on screen?
I don't have an objection. I was driving around Boston and noticed a lot of metal panels, not necessarily the expensive, what did you call it last time? I forget that.
Corten. So you notice we actually removed
But
Corten.
just like we had at Central School. Do you remember? Tina was going to ask you about the material that was used in the panels on Central School.
And I asked someone and all they could remember was anodized aluminum and the things
So
with.
even if it was like a natural color,
Yeah.
but in the interest of saving money is what I was
Sure.
thinking is something maybe we should consider.
So we actually have a few ideas like that.
Okay.
That middle one, the red one, is actually not a metal. That is actually a fiber cement board, which is similar to what you see around town with, you see the fasteners sometimes, you see them on developments. This one is particularly nice for us. And so we are considering something like that, that if we can get it designs to complement correctly, we'd like to consider, but we're also kind of considering everything equally right now as we run through these before the next meeting. And so we're going to show in that workshop 4, we'll be really diving into the materials and the options and the ratios.
Can I ask a quick question about the base? Will the base be similar to what looks like granite on the historic building? It's not very deep tall. Is that true? Will that be true on this one, or?
I mean, the height of the base? Is that what you're
Yeah,
asking?
yeah, will it be, I mean, I know the outside of the building is so far back in the slides, but just when you look at the building, I'm doing this, but I don't mean this literally as a measurement, but in terms of the scope of the building, the base feels like it's just a small part of what you see exterior. Is that what you're thinking, or will it be
I
more?
think it'll be probably taller than what's there. I mean, what's there is sort of a traditional granite water table. It's like how all of these buildings of this era meet the earth.
Okay.
And we're thinking likely a stone base, but I don't think we're necessarily thinking like the large granite block. It's more of a field stone, kind of reminiscent of all the fields and the orchards and all of those stone walls that are all around New England. Like that would be something that we probably consider pulling in more rather than like the big kind of monumental
No,
blocks.
yeah, but also just in profile taller than what
I think
is
so,
on the
yeah.
Like
historic
instead of a
building.
foot,
Okay.
it's 3 or 4 feet.
Yeah, if you go back, well, it's way back, but the kind of analytical diagram that we did of like the existing building and
forward
what we're
to-
proposing.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
this
base.
one, sorry, I was looking at my screen again.
Yeah, so that base, Lisa, on the right there, that's probably in the 2-3
Got
foot
it.
tall
Okay.
height range, so it's a little bit more prominent than the water table of the existing building.
But it's important to remember too that we'll be revealing the base of the turret, which is built of very rustic. I don't want to promise it's granite, rustic blocks.
Yeah, okay.
So we'll be in conversation with that, so we don't want to compete with it. We want to keep it lower than that, because that will be quite high by the time we bring this down.
Got it.
Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, I'm wondering about the hipped roofs, which are prominent in several of your schemes here. Is there historic reason for that? Or is there, I mean, are you thinking about other, aside from the flat roof, which you explained was just a three-dimensional schematic, are you considering other roof ideas besides hipped roofs?
Like a gabled condition?
Gable or shed or any, yeah, just wondering what your
We
thoughts are.
we gravitated pretty naturally.
I gotta say, this is my favorite thing. Let me just grab them.
We have a lot of fun with models. We've gravitated pretty quickly to a hipped roof condition, mainly because it's just so predominant on the historic building, that the sort of nature of the two angles coming together to create these kind of hipped moments.
Wait, I'm sorry, maybe I don't understand what hipped roofs are. I thought of these sort of two, this like intermediate thing, whereas I think of the current building as having one.
Well, this is a gable, right? Where
Right.
it comes to just a triangle that comes all the way to the wall. This is a hip where instead of this wall.
Oh, but it
continuing
doesn't,
vertically-
I see the difference. It doesn't have a peak.
We are
That's
coming
what-
all the way to the peak. No, because I think it feels like that's too much roof, like the flat was, and I'm not sure that we did any that tall. We can look at it. But the flat roof felt like not enough roof, and to come all the way up to meet this, follow these.
Because of
angles
the
up.
height that you get.
Yeah,
Got it,
it just
okay.
feels this thing, and it really does help, like take a minute and like pick it up and look at it as if you're, put your eye way down here and look up towards the building. It does help that is lower than the existing.
Yeah, I don't take any issue with the height. I was just wondering about the shape of the stick, but now you've explained what. Okay.
It's also important to remember the interior program as well. A hipped roof at these kind of light angles allows us to use the wall space potentially, but on a gabled roof, we'd be building volume, but that space wouldn't be as usable here. And of course, if we want to keep it below the eaves of the existing roof or below a certain datum, we'd have to make those walls usable if we lower the roof. So,
Great, thank
Thank you.
Explain.
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention that we did, like I said earlier, we did get a design estimated kind of holistically with other prices for other materials, and this is generally what we estimated. It's a little different than this, but we had a glass gasket, which is a curtain wall condition, and then vertical wood it's on something called particle board, and there's insulation behind that. We had the whole assembly for that, and we had a stone base, and we had options for brick for the base, and for the wall siding we had options for Corten, and we had options for slate, and
Glass.
And glass,
masonry.
yeah.
Point is that, we had to use our sort of professional judgment based on everything that we've heard to get a reasonable representation of costs in our estimate for the exterior envelope. But very well knowing that it is not set at all. So we have different tools now from our estimator to help us guide the design of this in a way that will maintain the budget that we have. And interestingly, wood cladding versus, glass versus masonry, there's differences in them. Now we have those, but they're not dramatically different. But we did make the call just based on what we had heard and our own intuition that, the sort of Corten approach of sort of the pre-weathered seal wasn't feeling right. So we've kind of backed that out of the equation.
Was it feeling like right from price perspective?
Yes,
Yeah,
and
okay.
just, yeah,
in general, it's
from a price perspective and just, against the existing building and just the sort of this broader context of Stowe that we're within, it felt like it would be a bit too much of an anomaly.
Okay.
So then moving forward, you would say like, okay, if you don't like the wood, here are other ideas in this price range. Is that how we'll start talking about it? Got it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and yes, exactly. And, we do, we do need to think strategically about the location of the materials and the cost of materials and using the ones that are more expensive in where they'll have the most impact, where you're going to be walking by them, where you're going to be seated next to them. We need to be very strategic about, sort of this elevation of the addition. It needs to look very nice and complementary and part of the overall composition, but we'll probably be strategic and think about perhaps a modified material palette on that side of the building versus the main sort of feature in the corner. All right, let's keep going.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we do want a bit of action items coming out of this. So we're, I believe, planning on moving ahead with a kind of hipped roof idea here, probably on that kind of front volume. And we'll study the back volume a little more, and we're going to study the angles of it and the heights. And at the next meeting, we'll come with a more detailed idea for it, along with materials.
This one. You mean, Lisa, seeing this as flat versus, so this is the kind of,
With two.
this is kind of continuing the kind of hip language, but because you're already seeing this is why models are so valuable, like it's creating some moments that need to get resolved, which are obviously not in this state. And as Andrew, the building committee, Andrew pointed out, this is starting to hint at a very clear kind of hierarchy. There's the gasket, there's the main volume. There's the, and then there's like the community room volume.
And I know you're doing landscaping next, so this is where you're.
How'd you do?
This is where you're anticipating like the courtyard areas is like these two spots. Okay.
We're gonna have to reserve that chair for you from now on.
So we do have landscaping next if we're kind of settled on this. I think relative to how our meetings have gone before, we're actually kind of on time. Even though it's only 8. So
Can I ask, do you want us to take an actual vote so that there's no question on how we've all decided?
I love it, sure.
Because I think,
Yeah, what are
we in the
what
past have some
specific questions? Like, are we happy with hipped roof? Are we happy with
versus
the massing? Is that the two questions you're
What
asking?
was, oh, actually,
This is on the exterior.
what was the idea with that you pulled up? Was that,
This?
no,
This-
Oh,
was
this, it
that
doesn't,
supposed
it
to
doesn't
be?
fit on this one. It fits on some
We
of our
just
other
kinda
study
like-
models. It was helping us inform the height of what you see here. And we have like a million of these back in the studio, but this felt too shallow. It's not following the angle.
And it's again, you can't use the inside of it if it's that cantilever.
and for that explanation, but since it's higher, it would be more just a roof structure and possibly visible on the ceiling.
Yeah, sorry, we didn't bring all of the bits with us, but like, if you were to take this roof off and put this one on, it feels too shallow.
Yeah, I see that.
And you're not picking up on the, I mean, this is such a steep roof. You're not picking up on those angles nearly as well. And it just feels it felt too squat on it.
I agree.
And that little building on the side, this is a full 2 levels before the roof begins. Am I understanding that correct or no?
Very close to 2 levels, yeah. I mean,
Okay.
we haven't gotten there yet in terms of like where exactly that spring point is, but
Okay.
it would be high enough that the second floor would not be impeded by like
Impeded
that.
by the roof.
Can I ask, I can't see, so when you say this little building, which one are you referring to on the?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
That's
Just like
okay.
this, I just want to make sure, like, because I just literally stayed in a place that has like roofs like this past weekend and we just kept whacking our heads into it. So I just want to make sure like that I understand that people like that by going with this type of roof over the one that they just showed, that we're not losing square footage on the edge because of
No,
the
you wouldn't.
roof.
So like this roof, the low one in the gasket,
Yes.
like that is it's obviously flat, but that is
Right.
above your head.
Right,
So you
right.
can imagine if you were in this space where
Right.
that spring point happens is above your
Perfect.
head.
Could I ask, would it be similar to the children's room in the West Branch? With
It
the
would be
way the,
higher than that.
It would
Yeah.
feel like you have more space.
but it would sort of look like
Yeah,
that from the
potentially.
inside.
We haven't really kind of gotten there yet, but the idea is that we could, and we have to just start looking at this because this roof form could start to become apparent inside the space. And how and in what spaces, we don't really know yet, but like that is something that we would explore, we'll explore.
And so what starts to define that kind of bottom eve and that datum is what's going on the inside.
Right,
Are there
got
bookcases
it.
going against
Right,
it?
right, right,
Do we
for sure.
need that space or can that kind of be leaned a little bit for some sculptural purpose or something? So, and that will help with the top ceiling height and the lower and slope edges, so.
Awesome.
Can you talk about the little door again?
If you don't mind, actually, we have that in the plan more, the
Well,
vestibule.
if we were gonna vote on the massing, I just wanted to know more about where the little door would. and what
Yeah,
it would be.
it shows up in plan. I think the short answer is it, we're in the plan that this correlates to. It's somewhere here, but that's a whole other conversation on whether or not we want to have the sort of
Yeah,
protruding
That's what I wondered.
vestibule or not.
Is that something we need to decide as we?
Let's look at it in plan and then we can talk about it then, because I think it'll be more obvious the impacts on inside.
So do we want to vote on the roof type?
Yeah,
Is that what
let's
we're doing?
let's do that. It just if, in general, if the hipped roof of the primary volume feels appropriate, and then the overall kind of hierarchy of low roof at gasket, the higher hip roof at the primary volume, and sort of a secondary flat roof at the community room volume.
And tell me again, if we need to put mechanics on the roof, it would be on the community room, flat roof,
So
but it would have some type of facade.
we're proposing to put it back here. So I turned around. This is the kind of rear of the library. So
Okay.
somewhere back here so that, from a primary view, it would be concealed.
Like on the gasket part.
Is that on the gasket or is that
Yeah.
on a different?
It's actually behind the historic building.
It's right back here.
Okay, so but this piece is really the gasket. It's just added on to it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I'll make a motion that we support the hip roof on the main volume, the
Nice,
flat
nice.
roof on the community room portion and the flat roof on the gasket. Does that summarize?
You're
what
gonna
we're
be an
talking
architect before you know
about?
I second,
Cool.
and I'm saying yes.
All in favor?
So this is just the exterior.
Oh,
I would,
sorry.
I would just quantify.
All right.
Awesome.
It's unanimous.
It's progress. I love it.
Thank you.
We need to do a vocab sheet.
Oh, we need
Well,
cards.
I
Oh,
was-
cards.
I was just telling Audrey today that I like to name all the options like turtle, elephant, something like that. So that it's actually very easy to understand, and we don't use
All in
kind of
favor of the
architecture
turtle.
buzzwords. Yeah.
So what do we just approve?
Yeah, which one was it?
The turtle?
They're all kind of turtles.
Oh.
So, turtle on
Turtle's
beach.
appropriate name for this town. This time of year.
So I'd love to jump to landscape. So we're including landscape in the exterior committee, right? And so I guess overall, I think it's important that the building committee or the exterior building committee does sit in on the building committee plans to understand kind of some of the moves that we've made for the vestibule and the roof eventually, and it's like the gasket and all of these, because it's starting to get really important to know what's going on the inside in order to make decisions on the outside. So for the landscape, we were pretty definitive in our last decision. If you wouldn't mind going to the next slides. we did propose kind of 4 options in the last one. We talked through all of them. We talked about all of the exterior ramp ideas and the exterior versus the interior ramp and why we really don't need the exterior ramp going between entrance and entrance, but we need the interior ramp. So we ultimately landed on the Scheme B ramp with the Scheme D courtyard. And that is actually great feedback for us. It's very easy for us to take that and implement it and work with our designs. And so we also, some additional feedback was gathering on the stairs, and no need for extensive ramping, multiple outdoor gathering spaces in the courtyards. So landscape architect took all of that, and so on the next slides, which you kind of saw in the model, but here's an illustrated version of where we've landed so far. This is almost exactly what we got priced. And so I know here, like, we don't have options, we also don't have the landscape architect with us, but we'd love to get some feedback on this. If the next slide is, would like to remind you of the constraints of this site. We are trying to negotiate around 10 feet of grade change on a very tight site. And that's kind of how we've landed with this current design. And on the next slides, this also takes into account a larger courtyard, which pushes the sidewalk out and creates a one-way street. It's also very important to remember. And there are a few precedents on the next slides that you can start to imagine within these spaces with this kind of gorgeous illustrated plan. But sorry, I should meant to put the plan after this slide again, but if you wouldn't mind going back to slide 24 to just digest for a moment.
So this requires the one-way road, or this doesn't require the one-way?
It does require it. I mean, the two-way road is possible, but it would start to restrict the courtyards a bit and create less security within there.
How close are we to getting permission to make that a one-way?
That's part of our plan. That's been part of our plan all along.
It's been,
Yep, the traffic safety committee is recommending this.
oh, okay.
Yep,
Within this as well on the road, we have a raised walkway, so you will be forced to slow down on that one way.
a raised walkway like a speed table or just slightly raised? What are we talking raised walkway?
To be determined.
Ideally, like as high as the courtyard, we have to get all of these, get the survey back still to understand exactly what grades we're working with. But that's in kind of what I've been imagining is that raised walkway is in language and almost at the same grade as the courtyards. So then it extends actually into the commons and into the memorial and starts to, the library then starts to engage with more than just its site and kind of with the rest of the town.
Does that say, I can't see this far away, but does it say outdoor seating like next to the new addition there?
It
with
does.
the- Okay,
Yeah, so if you, we should, sorry, we could have done this and show the precedent images. So if you click forward, I guess, was it 2 slides to go to the precedent images? Sorry. Yeah, so we're imagining, some of the surface is sort of paved either with, concrete or paver, stone pavers. There's this kind of idea of sitting within trees and large boulders. You're kind of, there's appropriate plantings, so it kind of feels like we use the phrase an outdoor room a lot, but it feels like it's an extension of the library and it's a usable programmable space. But when it's our next one, we've got a big meeting coming up. Our landscape architects are going to be back, right? Because we want to start talking about like the quality of these spaces with all of you, because we've got a good handle on the layout, at least we think we do based on the plan. But where the plantings are, what type of plantings, where there's benches, like how will these spaces be used? That's what we intend to talk about next time with our landscape architect, so that they can develop the plan even further.
Yeah, because I think like making sure that we have enough like outdoor programmable space is gonna be key. As opposed to, I mean, like the tables and stuff too, like this common areas, but like, I think just having like, you know, somewhat of a separate, like I like the idea of like some walling like they had in the,
Yeah.
in the West Branch, just to keep kids contained.
And so since this program seems to be mostly defined, we'll probably start to study the, you know, the wall heights and the materials, tree layouts and counts a bit more now. And then we can come to the next meeting with something more defined.
Yeah. I liked how with West Branch, there were like these big cement blocks, whether or not it was like you can sit on the wall itself, or if you can go where those wood benches were, like the wood benches, I guess, take up some of your square footage. But I liked that because they were still low and like kind of aesthetically very pleasing, but then also somewhat functional to sit on and keep kids from running into the street. So I thought that was kind of cool.
I think that looks awesome. I really like the large amount of usable outdoor space.
And is this little, like the way that you have the new edition, is that reflective of the square footage that you have in your last model that you guys showed us?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, it's more, this one I mentioned, the community room is kind of pulling out a little bit more. It's kind of more that footprint, but it's kind of a nuanced difference.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Yes, it is representative of the approximate footprint of what we're dealing with, but you're getting a little bit of insight into our process, because our footprint is moving and landscape is moving things. and we're not jiving 100%.
Yeah,
yet, but
I
it's
mean,
very close.
exactly. Like I feel
Very
like
close.
if the outdoor, you know, space on the right is somewhat differentiated from, like not differentiated, like they flow from one to another, obviously, but like that you can be able to have, yes, exactly, like that you can be able to have a program where those 3 giant trees are or wherever represented on the right. Yeah, that, Denise, if you can have programming in that space that's not being walked through by, you know what I mean? Like that's like, seems like kind of
And
helpful.
we want to talk about the cistern, but then we're going to go to the inside of the building. And at the end, I know our favorite topic, us too. When we get to the end, once we go through all the plan arrangements, we show the plan arrangements on the landscape. So you'll get a better understanding of how inside and outside are starting to talk to one another.
The thing I like about the placement of all the trees in the courtyard area too is, and I realize it takes trees a little while to start looking like real trees, but it sort of makes that nice interface with the new building too. So for the people in town, I mean, we all live in a town full of trees and we like trees. And so it helps marry that new building to the natural environment and makes it feel more blended. Rather than the old building, which just this giant red block on a hill, you know, it doesn't have a lot knitting it into the natural environment, really.
It'd be a small orchard, but you
We
can
can
imagine.
Yeah.
It's like an orchard court, you know, like you're sitting against the trees. It could be a very nice setting. Absolutely.
And to the point of, you know, the focal point of seeing this from 117, the trees are gonna help whatever it ends up being blend in
Totally.
massively anyway. It's not just gonna be.
I think, kind of modern design process engages the landscape a lot more than they did in the 70s. So it's a huge part of our design process versus what's currently there. And it does blend a lot more. And like we consider that a lot more. So.
Slide 28.
Thank you, Kat.
Welcome.
Sister.
She wants to skip that slide.
So we've discussed the cistern in depth. We got estimates, we got numbers for it. But for the 3 options here you see on screen, 2 are labeled on this one. But ultimately, we've heard on the next slides that option 1 and option 2 are becoming very difficult to do. Option 1, we drilled cores through the through the site, and we hit bedrock pretty early in there, about 10 feet down. And some things that go with option 1 and option 2 are that we would need a basement in the addition in order to get the pump to pump the water into the sprinkler system. There's a bunch of math pressure involved with that, but it would be very difficult to dig down as deep as we do, as we would need to. And option 2 would be very intrusive on the town commons. That required a head house above the cistern. So we'd be building a little building within that commons.
Tear down the stone post.
And so that leaves us with option 3, which I will say is difficult to build in, but it is on the existing abandoned fire station site. That would require a head house, potentially would require an above grade cistern, because there is bedrock on that site as well.
And PFAS, obviously, it's our ground
PFAS.
zero.
I think it's a purposefully vacated, not an abandoned fire station.
And
So what, actually, is that gonna be torn down or just left or?
We haven't decided yet.
So this issue is quickly become a sort of thorn in our side from a technical perspective, from a coordination perspective with our engineering teams, from a cost perspective. We are going to share the cost next, but I want to say very candidly, I said this to Denise and Tina in conversation. When we did our concept design, a year and a half, 2 years ago, we knew that there wasn't adequate water pressure to support a full sprinkler system. And we knew conceptually that a cistern system would be needed, but we did not really value or understand the complexity of that. And now that we're in this deeper with our engineering team and are starting to wrap our heads around it, it's become a big cost item in our cost model. So without further ado, I think that's our next
two slides.
2 slides. Sorry, I got ahead of myself. We can skip this one. We've shown this a bunch of times.
Oh, God.
Am I hitting the button?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I know what it is.
so we were targeting a year and a half ago, a project cost between 7.8 and 8.8. So there's a couple things that have happened. That estimate a year and a half ago anticipated construction starting now. Okay, so we've lost in the grand scheme of things, but our current estimate is assuming construction in March. So there's an entire year of escalation that is included in the new number, which is part of the reason why it's higher than what we had a year and a half ago. The cistern itself is nearly a $500,000 item. So we've got it subtly dashed here, but within our building systems, and we did not account for that. We had less than $100,000 in our concept estimate, and it's substantially more now. Oh, cool.
Denise, is there any opportunity to apply for funding from the state, from any place else for that specific part of this?
No,
No.
not that I know of. We are talking about some alternatives. I do intend to meet with the fire chief to get his thoughts. Because as Andrew alluded to, there is bedrock at the former fire station site, and if we are going to excavate, it requires a significant amount of work because of the PFAS. So if there's a way to do something above ground, short of a water tank, we can certainly explore that. I don't know what those costs will be, but we haven't found anything for that specifically.
So this is a placeholder for now. It might change for the better.
Or the worst. I mean, it really, when you start getting into these types of contaminants. So I will say, I am utilizing our PFAS money separately for some of the PFAS work related to the library, so that I can shift some of those costs, but this is not PFAS related. I mean, we have to deal with some issues because of it, but this is the fire code and the suppression that we have to put in. It's just given the site envelope, we're stuck with these challenges of what to do and where to put it.
This number hasn't begun to quantify the potential site remediation involved with PFAS. And we'll
Thanks,
talk
John.
about that a little bit.
That's
We
what
don't
we want
know.
them for.
From my understanding, we don't know what we're looking at on the library site itself. We know that, we know the former fire station site is ground zero. How deep and extensive the contamination is something we have to determine. So and there's cost implications in that if it proves to be correct that it is contaminated are not reflected in this number to date. So still some variables in play.
Can I ask a question? Did you guys price out the other options as well, or just the one at the fire station?
We did get rough numbers for the other options. They're all within a 10% variation of like $450,000 to $490,000.
Okay.
Central School built what, above ground septic system? What did they do there behind the big wall?
Or raised bed septic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that something that you could consider?
No, because that's septic.
But a raised bed cistern, like,
So I
make it
don't,
look the way centric, you don't see anything.
well, but we have to, I don't know, I mean, we're obviously in New England. I don't know what type of raised system with the winter we could put for a water system. I mean, we have to, those are the things we need to talk about. I don't know what the fire chief will allow us to get away with.
I mean, how it's
And how
protected
big.
from freezing and everything, it's all sort of in the design specs and NFPA design guidelines. There's a difference between, so this tank of water in the ground is just stagnant sitting there. So it's more subject to freezing than warm water coming out into a septic field.
Oh,
Can we just throw the cisterns into the fire station
yeah, could you just repurpose that building somehow,
as a cistern
aside from
station?
tearing it down?
No, it's the same
And then
issue, right?
Richard will have his art studio
Well,
on
no,
the
if
top
it's inside
floor.
We'd have to,
You'll have it at
Control the
asbestos
building,
level.
so-
But do we temperature control the building now?
we do because there's a water line in there, so we keep it
Yeah.
at the bare minimum.
So there you
but-
go. Just-
I mean, we'll certainly look at all options. We have moved the highway department almost entirely out because that's gonna be our storage for all the library materials when we're doing the renovation. All the furniture and everything is going there in case we need to keep it. With the costs, we may not be able to afford new furniture. So those are some things that we are intending to do in the short term, was use that building for storage if we need to use it for something else and
Like
put
cisterns.
the stuff the furniture somewhere else. I mean, that's certainly something we could talk about, but
Can
What were
you
you
throw
thinking of
cisterns
doing?
into a building without having to disrupt the PFAS ground?
Well, that's what I was saying about being above ground.
well, no, because we still have to do the piping. I mean, we still have to run
Gotcha.
the mains from wherever the cistern is.
Right,
into the
right,
library.
for sure.
So there will still be excavating.
Gotcha.
We do intend to use the town's licensed site professional to do some testing around the library itself, just to test on PFAS. There were some positive results when she tested the former fire station site. The more contaminated is the back. So there were a couple of sites, they did about 4, I think, in the front, and I think one of them showed no PFAS in the soil. So we can hope. We can hope, but we don't have any other readings because the library is on the town building water system. So we haven't actually tested their water because it's our water. So that's a completely untested site. But the likelihood that there is no PFAS anywhere that we need to do work is probably slim.
Right. Okay.
So we're doing our best to, or we will do our best to kind of mitigate anything that goes on here. We're working to reduce the size of the cistern through kind of getting a more detailed design is very important for that, as well as possibly some what I call code gymnastics. We're going to discuss this week and next week and the week after, and to try and narrow this all down to at least reduce the cistern to what we to kind of what the minimal option is. We still need a sprinkler system. Our code consultant basically shut down the option of not needing a sprinkler system within a new community building. Unfortunately, so we're gonna work through all of these ideas. I believe at this point, just at the firehouse, unless we think we should still look at option one. It just seems not inconceivable, but potentially.
I mean, my opinion is if there are constraints at both option one and the fire station, because they're across the street from each other, I don't know why we wouldn't just keep it at the fire station location, if we're able to use that, because I mean, we definitely know there's bedrock at option one. We know there's some, but I mean, the fire station area is a decent size. So if we could find some area that, you know, maybe is more conducive to this, or to have an above ground system or something else. I mean, to me, that seems, again, gonna depend on the size, because if we start putting things in the front in the parking lot, then we're losing the parking that we were gonna dedicate to the library. So,
Yeah, I mean, it's all in the works, but it is sounding like the fire station, even though it has its own challenges, is the direction we're gonna be looking at more in-depthly. And in terms of the overall cost, you know, obviously there's not an insignificant jump. I mean, it's almost $2 million from what we were expecting a year and a half ago. It's largely due to the market and the cistern. And this is late breaking news. We got the estimate yesterday. And we're design team and with John and the rest of the committee's help, I mean, we're going to be looking at ways to manage the cost as best we can and hopefully keep it within that range or get it lower. But that's all in process.
I have a question. I'm sorry, I have to leave. I have to present to the community just in 15 minutes. Town meeting approved $8.9 million, right?
8,850,000, yes.
Okay. That we asked at the time, we just said at the time that $1 million was going to come from community preservation and almost $1 million from the trusts.
Yes.
But we did not say that that meant 7,
Yes, we did.
but we voted for 8.85.
We voted for 8.85, but in the vote language, that third section says the funding from community preservation and the trust funds will offset the initial cost. So in that language, the folks voted knowing that they were not going to be paying 8.85 out of their pocket. They were going to be paying the net of those amounts.
Okay.
Yeah, the cistern is for the sprinkler system, or is it for actually, if there's a fire, when the fire people come and stick a hose in the hydrant, that's
So
applies
it's
to the cistern as well?
a great observation. What we actually own right now is for both the sprinkler system and for, sorry, I knew this number, a certain time of stream for the fire station to plug into. And so I mean, it's both of those, and that's where the sizing and
Well,
the pressure came
I
from.
know,
So,
including where I live, there are places where there are standpipes connected to groundwater, open groundwater. There's a lake down the street. Is there any possibility of using that as the source for fighting the fire and making a smaller cistern for just for the sprinkler system?
Minister's Pond, you mean, using that,
Is that what it's called?
where the
Are you talking
community
about
park
Elizabeth
is?
Brook that goes
No.
behind town building?
Sorry, going down 117
Yeah,
towards the
Minister's
shopping
Where the
center?
park
Elizabeth
is,
Pond, yeah.
where the
Yeah,
park is,
Yeah.
yeah.
is that what it's
Minister's
called?
Ring.
So the sprinkler tank for this building, the size of that and the water capacity is all determined by the codes and standards for the size of the building and the use of the building, having nothing to do with other water sources that may or may not be. So if you don't have a suitable city water line coming in, put in this water tank, and it's gonna tell you how big it has to be. So you can't rely on another water source down the street. That would be for the fire department to come. You know, this is gonna run for so many minutes, fire department's gonna show up with their own tankers. And fight the fire with water that they bring them.
Which they bring from standpipes that are.
This is for
Got
the
it. So it's
initial
really just
attack.
for the
should
This is
there
for
be a
sprinkler.
fire.
Essentially, yeah.
And it's not like we'd share it with the church and they'd share some of the costs or
No,
anything like
because
that. There's
you're
no-
not allowed to, I checked with the chief, because I tried to get, because they are actually putting in fire suppression cisterns for their own use if there's a fire in the area. You can't use a combined tank because there has to be enough water just for the interior sprinkler, and then there has to be enough water. So if there was, God forbid, a fire in the library, obviously the water inside, and then they need the water outside to fight the same fire. So they can't be in the same system. You can't use the same bucket of water for both of those purposes. I was like, do they make like a co-tank? Can we like split a tank?
So we're gonna dive into the cistern even more, pun not intended. And we're gonna keep the numbers down. We're gonna work on value engineering this building down, but with still all the ideas and minds that we're working towards. But we still have some more stuff that we need to go over, including plan options specifically. So if you don't mind, I would like to keep moving. It's really important to keep value in mind now when we discuss this, because we're at the point where we can't really add. Where we'd like to subtract when possible, but also make sure that this building stays important and complementary while keeping value in mind.
Can I just ask a quick question? If we end up at 11 million, what are we doing to make up that gap? I mean, we may raise some money, but we're not gonna raise $2.2 million.
So, quite candidly, I can't in good faith go back and ask taxpayers to pay for it. At the same town meeting that we're asking to vote a $250 million high school, which means I have to find money somewhere. So I can't find that kind of money within our levy that would not then sacrifice other town services. So there needs to be some creative effort of fundraising, grants. We're looking at sustainability grants that we can apply for. We're looking at other things, but that number has to come down in order for this project to go forward. And by when I mean come down is the portion that I'm gonna have to find money for is gonna have to come down. I cannot afford $2.2 million within our budget.
Is the option of the trusts still on the table, or is what they've committed all they can commit?
So I had asked them to keep an open mind that if we needed to come back, but even there's not enough that would really.
No, I know that, but there's a considerable amount.
Yes, and if the market continues to improve, that will increase it over the course of it, and that will have to be an option when we start to get, maybe the second estimate or potentially the third estimate, because we cannot put those construction documents out without some idea of where this money is going to come from. And that's something that I am struggling with, of how we're going to find this money.
Sure.
I know, like, because there's those, it's not just a trustee, right? It's like the Hale.
That's what I
fund.
mean, the two trusts, yeah.
Yeah, and then Tim's money.
They don't
Blood out of
contribute
the
to
stone.
capital campaigns.
They're a materials only trust.
There's a lot of material in this building. So anyways, but there's those potentials too, potentially. I don't know. As money potential.
That it?
Fire
For
away.
you?
So, yeah, onto the building committee. I'm just gonna breeze through some of this stuff. We've talked about the field trip locations and some discussions about the interiors of those. Next slides. So this is some of the feedback that you guys have seen before. I just want to say on the next slide that we've kind of plugged this into the next slide. We've plugged this into the program statement that
Can you all read that?
that I brought up last time. It's just an internal document that we use to keep track of kind of comments and what we're working with. And something that we've added to this and we'll continue to refine is on the next slide. The four of us, another coworker at Design Lab went to Randall and we worked on measuring all of the bookcases, and with that we were actually able to replicate the book counts and kind of confirm your count, and also more importantly confirm the numbers that we're working with. There's a very important number which is like books per linear foot, and we needed to make sure that we were using the right number for your collection so that we could account for the right number of bookcases and ultimately the right square footage of the building. So we did that. It was a pretty fun exercise. Made all these spreadsheets, did all these counts, and we were very close actually, which is great and very relieving too. So now we know the numbers to use when we're designing the bookcases in this building. Next slide. So some previous notes, these were, like you saw before, we're kind of building these up. So the ramp, the 3-stop elevator, a separate entrance for the flexible meeting room. Very specifically, wall should be able to open like at West Branch Library. Teens may want access to the exterior. They mostly enter from the historic entrance. And an important topic that we heard last time was switching the workroom and the restrooms in the corner of option 1. Now for the next slide and for this meeting, the action items that we'd like to discuss are what we're calling the community living room corner, an idea of an exterior terrace, the seating area size for the kind of sitting within the collections or sitting in the browsing and arrival area, as well as the meeting room capacity. So just keep these in mind, these 4 ideas when we're looking at these options, because these are what we really need decisions on. So the first plan, we're calling the closed corner option. So this is very similar to the printouts. Yeah. This is similar to what we saw last time. It's much more refined. We moved the workroom into the corner and we moved the restrooms up to above that. And with that, we were able to create a view path outside to the commons as well as to the exterior in the back.
There's one more.
Sorry, I think we only printed enough for the building committee.
But Marcy's gone.
A few other things with this, it has a simplified massing. There is small seating area within the collection space. And the small meeting rooms and the teen lounge is pretty much defined within this space. These are not changing in the 2 options. And on the second floor, the children's collection is kind of clearly within a single space with these 2 nooks kind of on either side. One's larger for program spaces and one's smaller for sitting and reading. And then we've accommodated a small storage space on the second floor for the children's library. There is no children's office in this scheme. And then on the, I forgot we had these larger ones, but everyone's pretty dialed in on their sheets. So we do have a few precedents, if you wouldn't mind just looking at the screen for a moment. For the browsing and arrival, they're somewhat open with a circulation desk and low ceilings. For the meeting rooms on the next slides, they're small and comfy spaces for small meetings, for potentially 6 people, 7 maybe. Here you'll see West Branch and a couple of our projects as well. Next slide, please. The collection space, again, West Branch on one side, on the right side, it is a similar feeling, especially for the collections with the lower ceiling. The left side has study spaces within as well, it's just a bit larger. The teen lounge, it's kind of got a different feel than the rest of the library. Somewhat
that Woburn?
colorful.
I love that one, yeah.
Sorry, which
Was that Woburn on the left?
I believe that's. Woburn,
That was the
yeah.
wall, I think they had, yeah.
It's PPL on the right.
Yes.
And larger. Yeah. And the community room, again, West Branch and Providence Public Library here.
Yeah, so pretty.
And yeah, that's Concord's. And the right is a recent project we just finished, Quinnipiac University.
Really pretty.
You guys are improving from that West Branch Library community room.
So here's just an enlarged version of level 2. You probably have a better look at it on your pages. And then we have some examples of historic spaces, which you saw at West Branch on the screen here, and on the right is Wellesley Observatory. It's a kind of meeting room, classroom-ish space.
Is that the project you just finished or?
No,
It's an
no,
older-
this is an older one we did. It's their observatory, the Whiten Observatory.
Oh, wait. For circulation, here you can see kind of a double height space with a stair moving through it, which you can see in the plan as well for Randall, as well as elevator next to kind of existing facade, which is then on the interior. Same thing for Whiten in the middle
Yeah,
there.
that's the same observatory project in the middle, Lisa, but it's, this idea, this gasket condition that we keep talking about, it will have
Yeah.
stair. So it's also these moments where we'll be up against the existing facade, so we want to use that in a way that's kind of really engaging.
As we go forward, is it possible to select pictures that are more in scale with what we're gonna be seeing? I mean, that on the left, amazing. That is not gonna be our library.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand what you're trying to illustrate with the open stairway,
It's like a mall.
but well, and it's our cozy little library,
Yeah,
but it would be
it'll be
great to
much
have a
more-
sense more of what it will feel like.
Yeah,
Where is that?
that's also at Providence Public Library, another project of ours. So yeah, sometimes we just,
That's a fair critique.
No, it's not critique. I mean, I think as we move along, it's moving from aspirational to realistic, I
Yeah.
think is.
Well, yes, and the idea is that we still have an open stair, it'll just be of a much different scale.
Mhm.
You're not gonna be, in that a triple height space like that, with
Right.
all of that open to below space.
then the next slide is children's collections, which I'm really noticing for the first time, we use very similar color story. But
Calm.
very similar feels. You'll see the hipped roof here. I mean, you guys saw West Branch, but
And I can't help but say, that's the Utes family on the right, my wife and 2 children.
Oh, that's adorable.
and on the left.
Yeah, they're in the left. Yeah, they're there.
Oh my god, that's so cute.
I think we saw Andrew getting out the elevator
that
at
you
West
in
Branch.
Probably,
What?
you did. yeah.
Elevator, right? And were you sitting in the back?
Oh,
Probably,
yes, yeah.
Yep.
So, okay, yeah. So I was in the Littleton Library recently, and on their lower level, I'm curious about those circular lights. They used ones that are honeycomb or hexagonal, that really seem to, I don't know, throw off a lot of light without it feeling like you were like in a crazy light room. Is there something about those shapes that offer better lighting opportunities?
It's just the optics of LEDs now. They've become so remarkable in
Uh-huh.
the quality of light that they can create, and they're also tunable. So you can adjust their
Oh,
brightness
okay.
and you can adjust the color of the light to
Mhm.
really be correct for the space that they're
Got
in.
it. Yeah, because it was in a lower level space, which would feel similar to our
Yeah.
lower level.
Lighting design is an amazing, very integrated part of our building, and we have a whole lighting designer just on this project,
Mhm.
that as a consultant as well, which we're gonna dive into during CDs.
Great.
And so, yeah, we'll start to look at all of those options as
Mhm.
well. So the next, the next option, we're calling actually, this is the closed corner option, still, but on the following slides, we have the open corner option. So
And we're, just click back to that, sorry, just to talk about why we're calling it that.
That's okay.
So we know the feedback from last time was about the kind of flipping these spaces and kind of moving this down and, but we couldn't help but think, and Audrey and Andrew are totally sick of me saying this, but this, as we talked about before, when we were looking at the building models, right? Like that is the corner of the building. And as much as we love staff and we want to give them an amazing space, which we will, we wanted to explore what if this space becomes much more public, as the space that will look out to the common. So that's why in this next scheme, we call it the open corner, because we've opened that corner up to sort of a more public use.
I thought you were saying you're opening it up to the outside and you were gonna give me the wall that I want in the community room.
Oh,
I
both,
thought that's what it was.
both options have the wall.
Okay,
or the
cool.
community
Good,
room that
good, good,
opens.
good.
Yeah, we just kind of took that for granted.
Let's click through this slide. You'll see a lot of the plan is very, very similar. And we'll get to a comparison here at the end. And frankly, what you guys are looking at is a comparison. But really all we did was we proposed taking the workroom and that was here with the circulation desk and flopping it over here. And then letting this become this, sorry. this sitting area. And sort of this idea of this sort of like community living room facing the common, it's right there. It does have a double height space, so you'll see, how do I do this?
Yeah, just kind of. Come on.
You'll see up above, we're exploring the idea of a double height space at that corner for more volume, a little bit more drama, more light coming into the space. We have, do have the vestibule poking out here. You were seeing that before, but there's opportunity for us to finesse this more, depending on how that feels. We've been calling it the innie versus the outie, but what kind of feels right. But otherwise, P is the same space. Meeting room is the same space. Elevator and ramp are working the same. The community room has gotten a little bit, we pushed it out just a little bit. It's actually a little bigger in this scheme. It could be pushed back, but that's one of the questions we were asking you, like, what do we think is the magic number for that meeting room? Other than that, it's almost exactly the same as the previous scheme.
Can I ask a question? So in this scheme, would there be an option to also put doors to the bathroom in the community room so that this side, so that we wouldn't have to worry about a gate or a chain fence or something, that you could have two sets of doors, one to the outside and one into the meeting room, that you could then lock that off and only give access to the meeting room and to the bathrooms?
Good question. I think potential, it would mean the footprint of the restroom needs to get bigger because the door is swinging, there's two sets of doors swinging and impacting ADA clearances. But that is possible, so for 95% of the time, those doors to the community room are like locked, and then like when there was an event, you could open them. Yes, but in this scheme, I mean, we were imagining, some sort of discrete bit here and there so this would all be open. So like you could have people come in, there'd be sort of an ante-room type space before an event. So all of the green bit and the restrooms would be open in the evening in the community room, and there would be like sort of discrete, screens to come across. And there was a similar strategy in the previous scheme.
Do we lose a lot of space if we have open to the top?
We lose a little bit, but this has grown slightly. And let's click up there. Let's go look at it. I'm sorry, I don't have the touch for that. But we're still able to achieve everything Denise in the children's. So we're still able to achieve everything.
Right.
We actually have weaseled in an office space here. What we did is a little different, is like where that children's line happens. That's not touching this thing. In the other scheme, it was a little further this way. So we kind of pulled this back to get the square footage to kind of equal out.
When you say open, I'm sorry to interrupt. When you say open to the below level, I'm only asking this because we already hear complaints about the noise. So are the children's collection and area? That's what I'm worried about. Like if you have quiet seating or.
There would be some glass.
Okay.
It would also, so you get some borrowed natural light
Yes.
into that space, but it would be acoustically separated. There would be some
Perfect.
solid
Gotcha.
or opaque wall. We'd get into all of that.
Yep.
But no.
But you're
there
not
would-
envisioning it as
No.
open.
It would be very
There's
different
no-
than the current.
There's no floor.
Okay.
So, there could be moments in the children's room where you look through an interior window, you can see down to the lobby.
Right,
and you
yeah,
can also
that's-
see out to the.
That's
car.
all great, even if it was all glass. I was just wondering for sound barrier, just because I know that's an issue.
And just, I think we talked about this last time, so there'd be some sort of well lighting here.
Yeah.
And then there'd be no lights here, correct? Because, or no windows. They get it from the turret, right?
Yeah.
Because this is underground.
The turret and borrowed light from the meeting rooms.
It's
Yeah,
under
that's
the,
right,
it's
glass,
under the
glass
door.
or something.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Is the dashed line that separates the circulation area from the lobby, is that an actual wall? On
I
the
think
level
that's
two?
our implying where, like, oh no, that is an existing wall. That is an existing wall of the library, so all the gray bits are like solid wall, and the white bits are either openings through existing doors or windows between new and old.
I guess that does appear as dashed, doesn't it?
And this, I guess, is maybe a question for Tina, but so do you envision having 3 circulation desks in the new library?
No,
Okay,
no, I think we had talked about eliminating one of the ones up here.
yeah,
So I think the discussion was, do we put it near the new entrance? Because that's where you're going, right? You're leaving, so you want to go to the circulation desk near the door. So I don't know about, where's the other one?
In the children's area.
Over here?
Yeah.
Oh, there it is, yeah. I don't know that we need that over there. But I think we were thinking that's Chris's desk versus the circulation.
Well, that one has an
desk.
office behind it. There's now an office behind
I thought you
it.
said we lost Chris's stuff.
In the first one.
First one.
In the closed corner, there's no separate office in the children's.
Well, like I
corner.
said, Chris is very aware that she's, people will come after her, so she's wondering if we should put that back in.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
there won't be enough workspace in just the workroom. Because eventually staff will increase and we'll need desks in there.
And it wouldn't necessarily be a circulation desk. I mean, she doesn't have a circulation desk now, but she has sort of that cubby, right?
Yeah. like it's half-
Yeah, so it could be something like that for
Right.
workspace, for public workspace, and then there could be a private office.
Yeah, we can, I mean, we can work through that level of detail with
Yeah.
her.
Yeah.
And if we needed to in the previous scheme, then the closed corner option, if we needed to work office space for children's librarian into that plan, we could figure out how to do that.
it just seems like nice to, instead of having a 500 square foot lobby, having a 200 square foot, you know what I mean? Like
On the second floor.
on the second floor, just because like we can't keep having all this lobby space when we're like, so when we need storage and space, right?
Well, sorry, we've got one other version, and then I want to put them side by side, because we have a slide that's the exact same thing that you're looking at, Kat, with the
Oh,
two
perfect.
options next to one another. Yeah, so here's some precedent images of just like the quality of that kind of browsing living room area, like that would be like the community, the community space in the building, looking out to the common, a taller height space would be a very inviting, welcoming place, kind of mixture of soft seating with some collection, some books, some new arrivals, whatever the case may be. And just kind of create a nice refined living room environment. We did talk about this in the model, and we said wait until plan, but there is a little bit of efficiency in terms of creating more space, usable space in the floor plan if we start to think about the vestibule kind of like coming out from the main volume of the building, but that obviously is a very distinct look.
So that's this open corner option.
In this,
As the
yep,
vestibule has.
it is. I don't want that to be a deciding factor, because I think we can figure out if there are strong opinions against it as an idea, then I think we could figure out how to make it work without it in this option. But this kind of being a little object that is appended to the building feels integrated, of course, with everything, but it's proud of the main facade. So that's what these images are describing. And then, yeah, here's a larger view of level 2. This doesn't have to be this big. Like if we figure out like we need more space up here, this can become a little smaller. That's all manageable. But what we were starting to like is that there could be, the children's programming areas in the same space, but this could start to feel like, young children versus early readers or vice versa. Like we could start to think about the children's way of like kind of breaking it up a little bit, still feel cohesive in part of an overall children's space, but different pockets for different age groups. Other than that, the second floor is exactly the same. Obviously, we'll get into the design of the space once we kind of land on its footprint. The image on the left is kind of to your point, like this idea of like looking through glass to natural light just the idea of kind of layering of glass and layering of other materials to create a sense of an enclosed space, but give a sense of a kind of bigger gesture. That's not to say that's exactly what we're proposing, but it's just kind of the layering of, like, you see the natural light through that, which could be nice.
I have a question about circulation upstairs. So I don't know if this is for Tina or if this is for anybody else, but it looks like that it's an island. It's kind of just sitting in the middle there. And I was curious as to, like, is that gonna be any kind of functional usable space for the library staff, or do they want a circulation desk right in the middle of the second floor, or how?
So that space is, I mean, it's admittedly defined, but it's undesigned. It's like we consider it right now a circulation space, but it's also space that everybody's gonna be moving through between coming from the historic entrance to the children's library. But it also needs to be there needs to be a circulation desk there to cover that front entrance, but there's also the nook behind that we consider a really important space. And so we want to dive into the design of that space, but right now we're just not quite ready. So it's a bit of a placeholder having the circulation desk in the middle. It's an essential part of the building because it's right at that moment between new and old. And so, yeah, right now it's a bit in flux, but.
Okay, that makes sense. I just thought it might be a little bit more helpful to have the desk like up against a wall, so they have like a wall space, but that, I mean, if it's still under, you know, design, that's fine, yeah.
Can I just ask about the innie and outie door? What made you think about putting it out?
It's
It's just a matter of space, or
Yes, it's a
design?
matter of space. So if you can just imagine, you know, this block coming in, you know, wherever that is, it starts to erode this space. And it's not to say we can't massage all this to get it, you know, to get it to be in there somehow. It's just we haven't solved that yet, and we wanted to talk about it like, oh, what if this thing is out and it's like very clearly, you know, the entry point. It'd be like, you know, just visually very, very apparent that that's where you enter the building.
I have a question about collections. So you've measured the amount of bookshelves. Do you, Tina, do you just continually deaccession books and keep it at a steady amount?
Yes.
So over the years, there's 30,000 or 50,000.
Yeah.
She does what they call weeding. I have a quick question, sorry. My only concern with both of these is just, again, like just the size of the children's programming area, only because, like, if you're saying that your community, you know, is 500 square feet and you're seating 30 to 40 people, I mean, obviously she does a lot of, the people are a lot smaller, but you know, she needs to have programming that'll fit 30 kids comfortably, right?
Yeah.
Like, so just as long as there's space, like 235 square feet, to me, that's the size of just a couple of these little meeting rooms together. I'm just not sure, like, I can see Chris being like, I need this whole entire space for my like programming, and right now you've got a couple stacks. So I just like,
Can I comment on that?
yeah,
I think it would be helpful, was it the West Branch that had all of the stacks were movable?
right.
So that
she
you
did
could
say
move them
that.
out of the way and have like a
Yes.
big program in the middle.
That would be
right?
perfect. Then never mind, just ignore. Yeah, exactly.
Also, like if Chris or a future children's librarian like wanted to, like, I don't know, host a puppet show or something,
Right.
something that they knew that was gonna get a larger audience,
They'd go to the
they'd go
community
down
center.
to the community.
Right, for sure. Yeah, no, like that's, I think that's what I'm envisioning, like, because sometimes she'll have 100 people at a program,
Yeah.
but that would definitely have to go downstairs. But I guess I'm just thinking like a weekly story time or something like that. But yeah, as long as the stacks are movable, I think that's fine.
And we're gonna work with Chris on that, especially at
Yeah.
the next time we interview her, present these plans. Again, these are,
Just
especially for the
very-
stacks here, like all these stacks measure out with the,
Yeah, no,
basically
that's
the
perfect.
exact number of books, and a bit of proof of concept. And then now in this stage, we're gonna start to dive into these actual spaces and rooms and lay
Yep.
them out, as the users intend.
So
So what
Andrew,
are the
did you need
votes?
us to
Yeah, the
give you,
votes.
make some decisions tonight?
Yeah, so there is one more topic that we'd like to discuss, option 2.1. Sorry, the slide, I think the slide you were on.
Yeah. why don't you walk them
Is-
through this, Andrew.
Yeah, so while we were working through all of these options, and we could actually see it in model here, we found a way to add a exterior terrace next to the children's, next to the children's space, so that you could have direct access from the children's library onto the terrace. And this was the option that we brought up earlier that has the most delicate touch, speaking of delicate touches, attached to the building.
That's this
So-
space.
Oh,
You can,
wow.
yeah,
Okay.
you can see.
Can I see it?
I'm sorry, so it's just gonna need a lesson in this next time.
So
And then you can just move it.
by changing the location of the stair.
Yeah.
um,
So we'll start on the first floor.
Yeah,
So by pushing the stair into the building a little bit and actually pushing the vestibule a little bit over, we're able to create a little seating area behind the stair in the collections. But most importantly, on the second floor, we're able to get an exterior seating area. It reduces the size of the lobby, reduces the size of the children's collections by roughly 100 square feet. We're still able to account for all of the books in there. It's just, it makes slightly tighter spaces in there.
Can you slide it over a little more to see?
Oh,
what
to get
will it
around
show?
the,
So there's no dedicated children's programming area?
there still is, it's just
Oh, it's
cut
just
off.
cut
It's-
off.
We cut this plan down to just what's changed, so
Okay.
nothing else changes in this plan, that's why we
it's,
didn't dedicate. an
it's in
entire plan
reaction to,
it.
I mean, Chris is used to kind of using a patio now for different, events, depending on the time of year. Gets a ton of sun, which is an issue. But when we met with her, she expressed interest in being able to have, direct access to an exterior space for children's and caregivers to use. So that was our attempt here. Rather than somebody having to leave the children's space, go through the upper lobby and then through the original entrance and get out to the landscape that way to get outdoors. This would be like, it's a pocket of space. It's not huge. It's 100 square feet, but it'd be enough for, a few kids and a few caregivers to go out there and read outdoors if the weather is nice.
A self-contained area. They can't go anywhere from that.
Correct. It's this little bit here, Denise, you can see in the model. It's, it's up above the first floor. I mean, there'd be a railing, it'd be a safe place for people to be. But, if she had a smaller story time group that, the weather was nice, she could go right out there. It's not gonna fit 15, 20 people, but it could, fit 5, 10.
Can you just like compare it to what that upper patio size is? Like, is it half of that upper patio that exists now or a quarter?
It's, I don't want to put a number to it, I mean, off the top might be a third or a quarter.
Okay,
It's a
Is that something?
a little larger than the meeting rooms that we're looking at in the
Mhm.
basement here, so we're talking 8, maybe 10 people.
like a bedroom in a house, kind of.
Are these 2 feet, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 by 10?
Question for
It's-
you. The windows are exposed in both of the designs? Like, you were saying at one point that the windows are more, like the patio option has exposed windows that I can see. If this is all enclosed, then what happens with those
So those would
windows
remain exterior windows.
in this new design? But in the one that you were just talking about, the option 2,
Good question.
it's inside?
It would be
Those windows?
inside, yes.
Yeah, but they we'd maintain the fabric of the storage structure, just it'd be
They would
covered
just be
inside,
covered.
you would still be able to
Remove
see it, it would be.
So this is the one that you were talking about, shows more of the original
It's
structure.
well, from the outside, it's the
From the
kind of, it's kind of the
outside, right.
least, it's the most delicate touch of the existing building. Because
Gotcha.
just the amount of new building that's touching the existing is reduced by this amount on the
Gotcha.
upper level.
So,
I'm ready to make a motion.
can we make 4 motions?
Yeah.
Can we make them
Here,
individually
so,
though?
so
Yeah.
yeah, so the community living room corner, the big difference between the two options is the open corner and the closed corner. Would love to hear opinions between the two. If there's strong opinions,
Well, I can make a motion, we can discuss it if people want to discuss. I would make a motion that we proceed with the open corner option
Second.
with the exterior terrace on the second floor.
I combined two.
So the exterior terrace is the next.
Okay.
Can I ask a question about, with the open corner option, so it's got open, it says open to below. And you said that's gonna be glass wall going up?
It'd be- Some of it would be glass, so that you get the sense of that borrowed light, but I don't think it would be entirely glass. But that's something we'd have to look at with all of you.
No, I'm just sitting there thinking about cleaning the glass. That's all.
One of those really long squeegees.
Well,
When
yeah,
kids put their noses up in the.
well, on the inside, that's fine, but from down below.
Oh, from down below.
Whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair question. I mean, it would be a double height space, so cleaning the glass, dusting occasionally, that would be something that, you'd have to do, but I mean, there's devices in which to do that.
And then the only other comment, since I'm bringing up cleaning, is that we have slop sinks in the building somewhere.
That's a very good point, yes. We need to get some
Aliens.
I thought
custodial
that tea was ready.
spaces.
I agree, I like having the open space in the corner like that.
Yeah, I agree.
So I'll remake my
Second.
motion, of just the
Sounds like
open corner
an
option
agreement,
for the
yeah.
lower level.
Second.
All in favor?
Well, you should
No,
have to
is
this
there
discussion.
any discussion?
Oh, I
More
thought that was the
discussion?
discussion, sorry.
Um,
All in favor?
Yep.
Okay, it's unanimous.
the
Next
next
motion,
exterior terrace.
I make a motion that we proceed with the exterior terrace on the second floor.
any second,
I'll second.
any discussion? Okay, let me take a vote for that. All in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. Next one.
The next one, it's actually labeled seating area size, but it actually goes along with kind of the open corner. So I think
Is it the
I
next
think that's
slide?
something we're gonna work through now that we have the open corner decided
It's
on.
really, Tina, when we get to it, it's a matter of how much of the collection do we want to accommodate in that seating browsing area? Is it a specific section, or is it rotating? Is it new acquisitions? Whatever we think is best.
And then the last one, which we didn't really dive into here, but it's the meeting room capacity. You'll notice on, jumping around here, the comparison slides that the open corner option has a larger meeting room area.
What's the best one to look at?
Sorry, I'm at 64.
No, so it's on 64. It's on a different slide. No, you gotta, I figured it out, just tap.
3 times, you go back to.
So you'll see that we pushed it a little bit to get
It's closer to 40 seats
Yeah.
versus 30 seats, and it doesn't seem like a big deal. It's really just kind of like a row and a half of seats, but we've talked all along around trying to be around the 30-person mark, which we are accommodating in both schemes, but does that still feel appropriate?
I mean, I think if we can accommodate it in the budget, that is, I mean, if it's gonna drive up the cost, I think we really need to consider the 25 to 30 seats, but if it's a negligible addition to the cost, I'd rather do it right the first time and not build
So-
the extra space.
We have a space right now that's got that funky angle wall that it feels like it results in a lot of wasted space. Is that a sacrifice that we make if we go with the smaller seating space? Just that there's some area of the room that's not super usable.
I don't think so. I mean, you can see in the image on the right, we've kind of squared that off
Right.
again and got rid of the acute angle. We could explore that for the option on the left. I don't think it will have that big of an impact on the quality of the space. The space is kind of growing. We're intending to have the presentation wall here. So, but we need to talk about that, because if this wall is opening, then maybe that might not make the most sense, but I don't think Lisa would really impact it.
Okay.
But we can kind of dial that in even more as we look at it in more detail.
The larger space would be nice if we could do it.
And the largest space on the first floor means the office on the second floor.
It helps upstairs, yes, with the children's area.
I make a motion for the larger community space. If we can afford it, I think that,
I'll second.
I think it makes a lot of sense.
Any discussion?
We're losing steam. I can feel it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, are you gonna call for a vote?
Vote on that. Show me in favor of the bigger room. All right, so it's unanimous.
Could I just revisit the topic of the seating area size? That's been tabled for tonight, and we're not gonna vote on that because you're gonna keep exploring it?
Yeah,
Okay.
it was somewhat dependent on the open corner, because then we could push seating into browsing versus pushing it
Okay.
into collections, so. So that we're nearly at the end here. There's just some pretty images coming up. I just want to kind of review the collections a little bit here. So again, we did this very large exercise. We know the book counts. We've kind of performed on the next slide this proof of concept that we can store all of the books in this new building. So here you'll see just the rooms that have books in them. The majority of the collection will be in the basement of the historic building. In these two options, you'll see the bit of a difference between the browsing and arrivals collection. It has 2,000 on the left side, and the browsing and arrivals on the right side has roughly 800. We, in both options, were able to maintain 12,500 in children's collections, and we're going to use the perimeter of the quiet reading and reference area and the quiet tech area for roughly 1,000 books and periodicals. So
Does that seem appropriate?
And where is the like library of things is just kind of interspersed in these kind of,
So the storage will be in the workroom, I think,
gotcha.
and then there'll be like a display.
Little
I think, like
displays,
we have,
gotcha,
right?
gotcha. Yeah. Okay, cool, thank you.
and then the next slide is just the options put over the landscape, so you can really start to feel what this is going to look like, or feel like more than look like. But
But that's the smaller community room.
yeah, the next one has the large.
Oh, okay, sorry.
So here you'll see that we're pushing in a little bit, so we need to negotiate the landscape now with the pushed out meeting room.
This is very exciting.
Can I make a suggestion? Maybe not for a motion, but I'd just be interested to see a show of hands that is like intrigued with the entry kind of pulling out as a gesture versus not. I mean, how do
Say
people-
that again, I'm sorry.
Call it the entry vestibule,
Yeah.
you know, like
Oh,
this
you want it-
piece coming out from like the main line of the building volume? Or is that something that feels like we should explore more and not totally table, or are there strong enough opinions that doesn't feel
That's a
right?
good question.
And we
Go ahead,
should,
Denise.
I mean, I like it because I think if we're talking about facility matters, there's that space that people, their shoes, the snow, everything's sort of left before they're in the main library. It can be that sort of vestibule of some, you know, I don't know if you envision doors on both ends, that there's actually some additional protection with the weather
There
and
is
things
now.
like that.
Like
I mean, I like that sort of space.
I do too.
So the main difference is, so we're gonna have a vestibule in either.
yeah,
It's no matter what, there will be
Oh,
a
okay.
double door or two sets of doors, but whether it's on the inside
Oh,
or
then
the
I'd much rather
outside.
outside.
Does,
That makes a big difference.
does the patio space to the left of the door become less useful
Like over here.
in that case? Yes.
No, it's where your like book drops go and, or, you know.
You're not wrong, because the workroom's right there.
That will be exactly where the book drop will be.
I personally like it outside too. That's just
Yeah,
my
very
gut.
interesting.
I think visually it makes it feel like if you're driving by, it's like, it feels just
There's a-
welcoming to know where the door is, to see there's a called out door, aside from the historic doors.
And I just want to add, Marcy's online now, so
Okay.
just in case.
Sorry, Cindy, one second. Woburn has that, don't they? Or no?
Yeah, and that was one of
It's
the
a little bit
precedent
of a-
images. Yeah,
right,
it's like
okay.
a sort of distinct, volume for entry. Yeah.
How does that impact the cost, like, like the door exterior versus interior? Because if we're looking for opportunities to save money, this might be an option, depending on if it impacts the cost significantly or not.
That's a fair comment. It does, you can just tell, I mean, it adds a little bit more exterior wall, just a little bit more exterior enclosure, so it would have a small tick up in the cost, yeah.
Well, we do have 2.2 million, right, to cut down to or try to.
It's true. It would be a start. It's got a long
Yeah.
way to go after that, but.
Well,
yeah.
sure, but I mean, I feel like we
But
have
it's
to
a
chip
good
away
point.
at it at
No.
small intervals, because we can't
It's a
cut
very good
out
point. Yeah.
big stuff.
It is, it's a very good point. I should have said, and I don't want to confuse the matter and like go back to the cost, but in that increase, that total number, we still have 1 million in contingencies for design changes to things that were missed in the estimate because they weren't developed or whatever the case. So there's still money in there, but you're absolutely right that this is something that we could use as a way to keep the budget down.
Okay. Anything else?
No, just a brief next step slide. Workshop 4, we're hoping to have our engineers at landscape design. Sorry, it's a few slides forward. We might adjust that a little bit based on the earlier conversations we had a few hours ago. So we'll get back to you with a real agenda on that, but we're also going to schedule the department meetings for the next few weeks, and we're going to work through some design development drawings and coordinating our models and our drawings as well, and then we're going to show you some exterior materials based on the decisions that we've made today.
Is May 3rd a hard date? If that would fluctuate, would we know when it would fluctuate?
Oh, we've been planning for it. Are you asking to move it?
No, I'm
Or
not
are you
asking to
asking-
move it. I'm just asking for confirmation, just so I can plan work around it.
I mean, it's on our calendar as
Okay.
the
Should keep
workshop
it,
dates,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
So just on the engineers coming, we obviously have a team of consultants behind us, helping us with all of the technical components and getting this building to live and breathe. But the intent is that we're meeting with the town departments, so we're meeting with Frank and others about building systems, and then we come back to you guys and kind of give you a summary of kind of the guts of the building, if you will, like what's happening. So that's the intention, and then any other feedback we get from the police department or the fire department or the public works or whomever.
Okay.
And then we've got the landscape and then all of our stuff. So it'll be another big meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, next slide is the end. That was fun. Look forward to the next one.
It's still the same day.
Does John?
It's
Yeah.
John's turn now.
Don't let poor
Oh.
John. I was like, wait.
John, he's not to go home.
John's
Forgot
like,
what I was gonna
just
say.
pay me, that's all.
No, I can do
I
really
think you
quick.
had some bad news about something too.
I can be really quick. So you don't just have 2 consultants under contract for this project now. The town, you being the town, you now have E5 Global, the hazmat consultant is now under contract. We need to quantify the amount of hazardous material in the existing building. We need to do that so that we have an accurate amount of remedial effort needed for the contractor, the bid documents. So they're gonna start doing that as soon as, probably by the end of the month. They're gonna be on site, so I'll have to coordinate with the library, obviously, on their site visits. So it'll be minimally invasive. They'll be taking bulk sampling, so they'll produce a report, and they will also produce a portion of the spec that's gonna have quantities, like I mentioned, of hazardous materials. So they're also, the same consultant is going to be, they have a licensed site professional on staff. They're going to be doing what we call a phase 1 environmental site assessment. We've talked at length this evening about the headquarters of the PFAS just north of the site. So we want to understand how and if that has contaminated our site. So the phase 1 assessment is visual, and it's record search, and it's some interviews with people that would know anything about the site. It's not doing anything breaking into the ground at that point. If they suspect there is contamination, they go to what's called the phase 2, where you do actually take samples and bring them to a lab. That would confirm that there is in fact, if there is in fact contamination on site. Phase 3 would be quantifying that contamination. What are the extents of it, and what's it going to take to remediate it? And what is the cost, right? So that would all get built into our estimate as we go forward. But a lot that has to happen. It all has cost implications, obviously, but it's underway. So again, it's starting this month, and I will be the coordinating point person with EFI and with the library. So.
What's roughly how long it takes to go through all 3 phases?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to all 3 phases. It's probably going to go relatively quick, depending on what they find initially. So I'll have a better answer on that after I talk to them in the coming weeks, and I'll report back to the committee.
And is this like of the library site only, or is this also the fire?
Just the library site.
Just.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay. So next is to review and approve for payment the invoices. And I forget, do I have to do these separately or, okay.
I make a motion that we approve the Design Lab Architects invoice from 3/13 and the invoice from 4/3 as was sent out to the group earlier.
Second. All in favor? Okay, that's unanimous.
Can I, Marcy, do you want to vote?
Oh, sorry, thank you.
No, she's, sorry.
Yes.
Sorry.
about that.
And I make a motion that we approve the Collier's invoice from April 4th as sent out previously.
Second. All in favor?
Like clockwork.
It's unanimous.
I make a motion that, oh no, I have to make an amendment to the minutes, so. Can we get to the minutes?
Yes.
We still have a quorum of exterior, yes. So the exterior design committee meetings, I'd like to make 2 amendments. The date should be March 8th, not the 9th. And Lisa, you listed yourself as a committee member, and I asked that you strike
Oh,
that.
sure.
So I would make a motion that we approve the minutes as amended.
I second. All in favor? That's unanimous.
Make a motion that we approve the library building committee minutes for March 8th for the 2.0 committee as presented.
Second. All in favor? It's unanimous. Marcy, no. Not that time.
Yeah, she raised her hand.
Oh, she did. I'm
Um,
sorry, I'm not. looking
Okay,
up.
anything else that we need to talk about?
So can we, I know this is gonna go on, but can we close the loop on some community input?
Oh, yeah.
Can we, so we see what you're gonna present on May 3rd and have an idea of what we want to present to the community as options or ideas of what we're looking at?
Does that give us any time to gather that between May 3rd and when?
How much time do we need to plan one of these community meetings?
Well, when do you need an answer, I guess is the first question, and let's go backwards from that.
Well, and I also wanted to add, like, is it gonna be kind of what Tina suggested, where they just give us 3 options, kind of broad options, and instead of everybody saying, I want this, I want that, I want that, just like, here's this option, this option, this option. These are your options, or is it gonna be more of like a more in-depth community thing?
If you don't mind, I think we would like to think about it internally based on what we can produce in time and what we'd like to get in on. And we do meet with Denise and Tina and John weekly. So we can review that with them. And I'm not sure what the process to report back to the committee is, but we can do that somehow. Just would look to you for what that process is and to get first feedback from you on how we would like to get input from the community. But I think we'd like to think through it internally first.
Do you know like how that would affect the timeline as far as like, if you just, like theoretically were to just present 3 more finalized options versus if we have to do something that's more in-depth than that, like how you think it would affect your timeline as far as the rest of it?
You want to take that then?
Well, I guess I'll put it back on all of you. We are intending for the May 3rd meeting to come to this to the committee here and like present options and strategies that are much more developed than what we've been talking about so far. We can easily present those same options to the community like the following week, like if that's the intention. But my question back to the group is like, if we're just seeking input and people can say, yes, I like this about that, and yes, I like that about that, but then the exterior building committee can come back and tell us, like, we've heard from the community, excuse me, this is how we want you to proceed, then I don't see a major disruption to our process. Alternatively, if we go into the community and we present these options and a handful of people say, I don't like any of them, and we're then tasked with developing new options in reaction to that feedback, that will increase the design process.
So is that something we need to decide tonight as a committee, whether, like how we want to, out of those 2 options, which one we want to pursue?
Well, I think like Marcy and Denise were saying earlier, in the end, we're gonna have to make a decision
Right.
regardless, right? I mean,
Yeah.
if the community comes back and says they hate everything, what's within our, I mean, I don't know then, do we go back to the drawing board and start all over? What's
That's
the
what I'm
option?
saying. He's saying that's our
Right,
decision. So like, should
Yeah.
we decide on that today or should we push that to next time? Like,
No, I would push that till you get your feedback. Right?
well, but I'm.
Well, I guess you have to push it before you ask for the feedback.
go ahead, Frank.
I mean, I don't live in Stowe, but I mean, you have the design committee, you have the building committee. It's a good idea to ask for public input, or, generally what you think. But you have a date where you have to have the design in. And you can take all that information and do with what you will. It's advisory to you. So I don't, it doesn't, it's, again, it's not my town, but it doesn't seem like it's a great point to suddenly change gears a lot. I mean, if you had if nobody in the town liked it at all, that would be one thing, I suppose, but, take it as advice and how you want to proceed with the, with maybe the details of the design, but not necessarily redoing the entire. The idea is you have a, they developed basic concepts based on the historical building and the new building and all that. That's just my thought on it, but then again, it's not, like I said, not my town, just sort of my
It's why
2
these are,
cents.
sorry, it's why these are open meetings. And theoretically, these seats could be filled with
Yes.
public, so,
Just like through the
and
whole
and
planning
we didn't-
process.
the chair would ask for public comment. And
Right,
and
I
the
agree.
committee would hear it.
I like that idea of just making it a part of the meeting.
I agree.
Start publicizing it next week when we know that it can happen. And publicize it everywhere, and the really interested people will come.
Well, but I guess at what point do we put it on our website, we put it on Facebook, we put it on Twitter, that we're having these meetings?
That's fair
Meeting
effort.
information is posted. So I guess the question I would say is, how much further do we need to publicize? I mean, we can certainly, I can ask the paper to write an article about it and just talk about the progress we've made, and maybe they'll drum up some more interest, but and then I think I told you, as I post the meeting material, anyone who signed up, which again is still 3 people, but I send the notification out to anyone who's interested and wants to follow the project. So we are trying to do as much as we can without paying for an ad every week or posting a public hearing notice.
Right.
I mentioned it, and we've mentioned it in meetings. So, I mean, I think I like the idea of having sort of the designs, and not so much yes, no, it's well, what do you like about this one, or, and you know, so maybe it's they like the material and the base on this one, but they like the material and the,
Yeah,
I don't
and that's
know what
the
else
type
you
of
call
stuff that type of feedback is helpful.
Right.
And then it gives us, everybody at this table, say, you know what, hey, we heard, there seemed to be a general gravitation towards this aspect of this design. Let's figure out how to incorporate that. And maybe they liked a little bit more, just like we did with the landscape thing, right? We took this part of this landscape out. So we can do that with the elevations. And if someone says, yeah, this one still feels like it has too much glass, or hey, I really like the wood in this one, like that's great. And we can take that and together with you guys, massage that to a final product.
But is it the voice of 3 people out of 7,000 residents? You know, I mean, that's all the other question is, what pushes change? It can't be 3 people shouting in the room and no one else cares.
Well, that's the point of the.
but that's what it comes back to the committee.
That's the
Committee's
point of the
charge,
committee.
is to take that feedback from the public and then proceed.
And I would say, you know, if that's the case, if 3 people who are against everything show up at a public meeting or provide input, then I would say, I would ask all of you who are residents, talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends and say, you didn't come, but what are your thoughts on X, Y, and Z? And so you have your own feedback as well. Because again, and I say this, and it's not a criticism to Stowe, it's happened everywhere I work. There's all this hype about a project. We do all these meetings, we solicit feedback. I mean, we had all this push about our open space plan. They got like minimal responses back, because at the end of the day, I do think that people trust in, you know, okay, we need a library, you know, maybe we'll have an opinion one way or another, but at the end of the day, we're gonna have a new library. And people trust in the process that, you know, no one's gonna have bad intentions. Everyone has, you know, the best intentions of Stowe and its residents and its employees at heart. So I think at some point we have to decide when we've had enough. And I do think, like I said, we advertise and publicize this as much as we can. I will reach out to the paper and see if they can just provide an update of where we are and sort of encourage them if people want to weigh in on it. You know, jump on our meetings, watch our meetings, provide feedback to a committee member.
Yeah, I'm not trying to complicate things, but it strikes me that in the long run, community opinion about the inside is gonna have a lot more impact than what they think about the building from the outside. And if you're not soliciting that, which is okay, you're not soliciting that, but that's much more about how people use the library.
And we did solicit that during the preliminary.
No, but I mean, what the presentations are, you know, like with this. So I don't think it's necessary. I'm just saying that you're not doing it with that. So that's how it.
Yes, I just want to say that I totally agree with option A. I'm not looking for everybody to come forward and have us redesign everything. But I do want to try to get as much input as we can on the materials and, you know, just that, exactly what you said. How do I need permission to print up big posters to put in the library and the senior center and the town hall that say, join our meetings, you know, when with the QR code and all of that? I mean, I want to reach more people.
Well, if you need money, you need permission.
No, I don't, I'll foot the bill, but do I have permission, you know, do I need to get permission to do stuff like that?
Well, yes, because you're one committee member, so you would need a quorum of the exterior committee to authorize you to act on our behalf.
So I can't do that until the next meeting.
I mean, you could, it's up to the chair. I mean, we have other items not reasonably anticipated. If you want to throw that out there and take a vote.
I guess the whole reason I brought it up was because I didn't want us to have to go backward whenever we're like like he was saying, the next stages of the design process, when they get to the blue line, which is coming really soon. You don't want somebody or several somebodies to come up and be like, oh, now I don't like this, you know? So that's kind of why I was like, well, if we can decide now, kind of try to do it. That was my thinking, but I agree, we should still have input.
All I want to do is promote people attending these meetings via Zoom or coming to the meetings. Nothing, not going to present any design sketches or anything like that. Now, I just want to get more word out there that there's ways, go to the website, you know, all those things. That's all I want to do, but I want to do it sooner, not sooner than May 3rd, because I don't think we're going to have time for any other
Makes sense.
input beyond that.
So I would encourage you to make a motion of something.
Okay, I make a motion that I be permitted to promote
Outreach.
outreach that is currently in place.
Second.
All in favor?
That's the building.
And that's without images, right?
Right, no
Yeah,
images or
fine
anything,
with it.
just encouraging people to.
Okay.
And then go to the website and
Who
find out.
seconded that?
There was unanimous.
No, who
Denise.
seconded?
Oh, I seconded
Oh,
that.
thank you.
Yeah, that's the whole point of having the web page on our site dedicated. You should be driving traffic there. That's where our agendas are, our minutes, the invoices. I upload the PowerPoints. I put the link to our videos. That is a one-stop shopping for both committees. It's all in one location. So
So
if
people
people want
want
to
to sort of design something and run it by you to make sure that everything's. Okay.
So,
motion to adjourn at 9:30. Did you have anything else?
well, I want
Another
to,
PowerPoint?
yeah, we've got 40 more slides. No. So just putting this out there, so if we get, so for May 3rd, if that starts to get more traction where we think more community members will be here, which is totally fine, we may want to reconsider having our engineering team here, because that'll just, it's just gonna be too much for people to sit through, and like, I don't think that's gonna be of interest to them, which is fine, we can shift that around, but just keep that in mind. And
Well-
we can work through that.
Are we doing if we broke it up into exterior design, which is what I'm promoting, people get involved in, would the engineering part be the building part?
Yeah, we can have them come later. Yep, that would be fine. And then the other thought I was gonna add, like, if that's the direction we're heading, where we hope to get more people here on the 3rd, and we're presenting the options, right? We could pretty quickly, in another day or two, get those up online in a online survey format for people to look at that way and provide feedback that way. In looking at our schedule, like, we could give them a week, 2 weeks to provide comment. And I think that would be enough time to get those comments back before our next workshop, and we could react to that as a team.
Can I say, when you say the next workshop, do you mean the May 3rd or the one after that? Talk about the one after that.
I'm talking about the one after that,
Okay.
for when we would get so
we would have the presentation and then we put a survey out.
correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're not
Yeah,
putting
and
that
that
in
would- there's
advance.
3 weeks in between those, so we could give people a couple weeks to respond, 10 days, whatever. And then we could gather that information, we could talk about it at our next workshop and figure out how or if we need to react to it.
I think that's great. And quite frankly, if because we do meet with you weekly, Tina and I, so if something comes up, we can call a meeting of the group, even without you to say, okay, here's where we are with the options. What do you guys think? I mean, we can even just call a Zoom meeting if we need to find something out from the group before May 3rd. So we can pace
Okay.
another meeting if we need to, of just the committees or committee between now and then, if something develops.
Sounds good.
Awesome.
Motion to adjourn at 9:33.
Second.
Thanks, Marcy.